Morena. Good morning, Morena. Welcome to our council meeting. Right, just before we officially open our meeting, I want to say welcome to our team in the gallery, to our Menfield team, to our Kōwhata team. Welcome to our meeting this morning. And our Chief Executive is absent today and tomorrow, so Hamish Waugh is stepping in as acting CE for today. So welcome. So to open our meeting this morning, I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Michael Ford.
Morena, and good morning everybody, team Manawatu District Council and members of our community. Firstly, my sympathy and best wishes to all affected by the cyclone with floods and slips, and I'm confident that I speak on behalf of everyone. I apologise in advance if I have the next word wrong, but I'll try. Special manaki to Ngāti Kōwhata iwi as they face a big clean-up after the flooding of the marae at Kōwhata Te Arakura. Secondly, a big thanks to all involved in the response and recovery, led by you, Hamish. Thank you. I wish to share a few thoughts this morning about religion, spirituality, tolerance, and tiddlywinks. I was brought up as a Christian, and I have respect for the Christian religions, but I don't currently practice the Christian faith. Whether you believe in God or not is very personal. I can probably be described as being agnostic. I'm pleased that our government and local governments are secular and neutral in terms of religion. Provided that Christian and non-Christian religions promote peace and good behaviour, I'm happy to respect all such religions. They generally have very good teachings in respect to how we should treat each other. I'm certainly no expert, but I'm very comfortable with 8 of the 10 commandments in the Bible, and much of the Islam religion is very similar to Christianity in its teachings. Our New Zealand community and even our local community has people practicing a wide range of religions as well as no religion. I consider that we should be respectful of all of them. There are aspects of all religions that I take issue with and disagree with. However, I still respect the religions and the people who practice such religions and try to show tolerance and respect to the aspects that I disagree with. I don't expect anyone to tolerate extremist religion where advocates consider non-believers to be evil and where violence is used or advocated in the name of religion. Remember that there have been plenty of extremist Christians as well as extremists from other religions. Most wars have been fought over religion. My God's better than your God. When I was in Northern Ireland, many years ago, they were still, to some extent, killing each other over different brands of Christianity. And you look back and think what a waste that was. I have to say that when I was there, 99% of people were good peace-loving people who were just getting on with their day-to-day lives, but there were extremists. Fanatical religion can be very dangerous. Spirituality is also very personal, and one can be spiritual without being religious, despite the two usually being hand in glove. Tolerance of our differences is one of the most important qualities that I wish to emphasise today. I've sat here for over 6 years, respecting Christian and more recently a few Islamic, Karakia and colleagues' meeting openings. I consider that every one of the people who have opened the meetings to be a good person, doing good in this world and in our local community, and we often benefit from hearing a little of what is happening in their workplace. While I may disagree with some aspects of their religion, I believe that the people opening the meetings are well-meaning with a good heart. I also respect them in their right to believe whatever they like within the law and basic tenet of being a good, peaceful human being. I also respect you all, my councillor colleagues and operational colleagues. We all make up Team MDC, and I consider you all to be good people wanting to do your best for all of the people of our Manawatu district. I believe that you all have a good heart. From time to time, we may disagree about how to do the best for all of the people of the Manawatu, and we may debate such matters robustly, but that's good democracy in action. And we win some and we lose some. The things to not lose sight of are the need for tolerance, to debate the topic and not the person, to be able to agree, to disagree respectfully, and be big enough to make an apology if we make the odd mistake. Those of us who are politicians need to have a slightly thick skin. For a start, many people just don't like politicians. That's the space we work in. As politicians, we often hold strong opinions, And I would say that is because we care strongly. The thing is that we don't all hold the same strong opinions. In fact, in some cases, we hold strong opposing opinions, generally representing some of the range of views of different sections of our community. As Tana Umaga once famously said, we're not playing tiddlywinks. Robust debate is good as long as it is delivered respectfully. I certainly need to remind myself of this. So I look forward to our meeting today, or meetings today, and working with you all to collectively do our best for all of the people of the Manawatu for the rest of the triennium. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Right, let's move on. Apologies, we have none. We have a full team here today, which is great. Requests for leave of absence. We have one for Councillor Belsky from the 3rd to the 12th of March. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hadfield.
Happy to move, Your Worship.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Ford. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 4 is confirmation of minutes from our last meeting held on the 2nd of February. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Ford.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 2nd of February 2023 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Short. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest. This is the opportunity for any of our elected members to declare potential conflict on any of the items on our agenda today. Thank you. There appears to be none, so we can move straight to item 6, which is our public forum. Now, welcome, Sue. Come and join us, please, at the table. Sue's here to talk to from Rethink Waste Manawatu to talk about the flexible plastic recycling. So welcome, it's good to see you here.
Can anyone see the screen?
Yes, we can. We've got several versions of them. So,
Oh, thank you. Is it that one? Right. Thank you for having us here today. Bridget is supporting me, and apologies from Joanne and Keith Thompson, who are stranded in the South Island because of the cyclone. Anyway, I wanted to just rejoinder with you about 10 months ago. A few of us came and submitted and some encouraging things to when the council was consulting on its waste policy, the waste management and minimisation plan. And those of you who were elected reps at the time might remember this box. This is the amount of rubbish that the council controls, and its council control collections, waste to landfill, and this is the commercial volume. So most of the waste in the district, the council collections don't control. They're run by private businesses, and this is the composition. So today I'm talking about flexible plastics, and this light blue line is the proportion of plastics to landfill. And to be honest, I don't know what the proportion of flexible plastics to landfill is, but it's just giving a context that there is a lot of plastic goes to landfill. And sorry. Oh, there we go. So the context of waste minimisation in New Zealand is managed by the Waste Minimisation Act 2013. And in 2020, the Minister for the Environment declared that plastic packaging was a priority product, and flexible plastics are just a big component of that. I don't need to preach the converted. I'm sure you already understand these things. And so by June this year, the industry, which is the Packaging Forum and the New Zealand Grocery Council, are supposed to have up and running an extended producer responsibility program. Now, some of that sort of thing is already up and running. I'm not aware of any in our district, but there are many sites around New Zealand that you can drop off flexible plastics. And moving on to the waste hierarchy. So when we're thinking about how to minimise waste, the things at the top in the green are the things that are most beneficial to society, and if you look at the quadruple bottom line, and the things at the bottom are the things we least want to do, and that is landfilling. So this is the landfill thing. So for those of you who weren't elected reps a year ago, this orange little segment here, I'm guessing that the Civic Centre in Fielding is 10 metres high, right? And so it's about, these are the dimensions that I got off the Horizons Regional Council, the clicking tool to measure the dimensions. So that's the approximate length of the building, that's the approximate height of the building, and that is the width of the building. So this, if you just had, if you assume that a 70-litre rubbish bag weighs 6 kilos and that is a rubbish bag, then that is 0.07 of a cubic metre, and therefore this is the uncompacted volume of bag equivalents that this district alone is producing to landfill, right? And so I just think that if we're looking at these waste minimisation options, the reduce and the reuse options are things that the people who buy the product have more say on. The council collection is really about managing the disposal or the recycling of the product. So it's not something that, except in your own purchasing and procurement policies, that you can affect as an organisation, but something that you can affect is what I'm here to talk about today. And so this is a screenshot from the MDC website, what can be recycled. And so in the recycling wheelie bin, they're saying any rinsed plastic container with the tops removed off, symbols 1 to 5. And I think Brittany Evans confirmed that is it, Hamish, it's now 1 to 7, is it? Yeah. So anyway, that's plastic containers as opposed to flexible plastic. So what I've done, just to try not to do PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint. This is a carefully washed and dried, the actual things from Ken and my 1 week of rubbish, right? Okay, this is all of our rubbish to landfill because we're not old enough to need nappies and we haven't got any babies, right? So this is our only waste to landfill. We recycle our beer bottles and our wine bottles, and we compost all of our food. Because we've got bokashi, we don't have to worry about pigs' guts and things like that. So they don't need to go to landfill. Things that came from the earth can beneficially return to the earth. And so these are the too hard basket for many of our residents. And I'm not saying that they're the only things, but it's just perhaps a low-hanging fruit. And as a sort of a fledgling little community group, we just thought that it was something that we perhaps could encourage the council to collect. And when I say collect them, those of you who've toured resource recovery parks, you'll know that they are run by conveyor belts. And what happens, and I know the Vizzy one in Onehunga, 10% of the operational time of that 24-hour factory is shut down, and the workers have to go out with their pocket knives and uncut these bits of things. People put duvets and flexible plastics and crazy things in their recycling bins, and they have to cut them off the conveyor belt wheels because the factory is in a million conveyor belt wheels. So what I'm suggesting is that we just, if residents who care and can be bothered have the option of just shoving them all in a contained bag like this, so that they could all actually just be, the bag could be tied off. All of these things easily fit. You can see in the photo, they easily fit into this bag, which I've re-undone. And so, obviously there's a whole lot of practical stuff, and it's not for me to tell Smart Environmental and Hamish how to do their jobs, but obviously things like this, which are actually a layer of plastic with a thin layer of aluminium foil, they're a composite, and you'd have to work out whether they're in or out of scope, that sort of thing. But what we're saying is that if it's actually a very easy thing to, for people that can be bothered to set aside some sort of plastic container, and then you just push it down and it just compacts to nothing. And then if that, you know, was of rinsed off plastics, the unit could just go into yet another bin at the Resource Recovery Centre, and perhaps, you know, one of the products that it might go to is Future Post, which, you know, many of you will have heard of the fence post. So, I mean, I could go on. There's other things. I'm just outlining that we're very grateful to get a small grant of $1,200 from the council for our 2 public meetings, and the various things that we'd like to do is Rethinking Waste Manawatu, and those of you, I'm probably preaching to the converted. Most of you will know that the legion of wicked problems associated with plastics. And I think somebody from the Plastics Aotearoa group, they said this great thing that landfills and plastics are a bit like antibiotics. We can't really do without them, but we should use them only when we have to. Yeah. Anyway, and I'd just like to point out, I know I haven't got all day to talk because you're busy, but the top right photo, that is when people talk about these marine gyres where all of the plastics eventually float out to sea through our waterways, and when they're in these big marine gyres in the Pacific and the Atlantic, they're actually more like the top right photo. They're sort of like little plastic soup, and the problem with that is that they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and so the plastic particles have been found intracellularly in fish tissue. So we're eating it, and, you know, little fish eat bigger fish in, you know, the food chain, and we are one of the living organisms in this world at the top of the food chain. So, you know, we're all ending up eating it. And I'm not, obviously there are solid plastics and things like that, that albatross has eaten so many fish that its bowel's been obstructed and it's died just because it's eaten so many. And I think that photo is a famous photo from, I think it's called Faraway Atoll, or some place that's 1,200 miles from any other landmass. So it hasn't come from like out of the Auckland Hauraki Gulf, you know, rivers or stormwater pits, you know. This is just a big global thing. And the other thing, at the last minute, Bridget wisely suggested, is that we also, you know, like I unfortunately can't drink milk, and I have to buy this stuff, and it only comes in these boxes unless you pay top dollar. And so anyway, there are various people like Saveboard who make these Tetra Paks into sort of the equivalent of jib board, those sorts of big boarding things for construction. And so the photo on the right is one of their products that they make, and they've, you know, they've been you know, supported by brands and all those other. Yeah. So I'd also like to invite the council, as well as to consider recycling flexible plastics when they're rinsed and bagged, but also to recycle these, because that's not listed as a conforming product, and Brittany didn't think that they were currently collected. So anyway, I'll finish with a bit of marine waste art. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. I just admire your passion for getting us to think about waste and what we do with it. I'm going to ask Hamish just to share some of the innovative work that we're doing around this to help in exactly what you've raised this morning. So Hamish.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, Sue, I mean, yeah, good morning. You mentioned a couple of times about preaching to the converted, and I think you genuinely are with the Manawatu District Council. If you refer back to our waste management minimisation plan, which was adopted by Council in June of last year following a public consultation, that spells out a range of initiatives focusing at different stages through the waste hierarchy to I guess, target and identify exactly the types of low grade, low value, hard to recycle plastics and other products that do end up in landfill. So I know you're familiar with that document and you've had to read through it, and you've mentioned Brittany in terms of some of the conversations, and she's part of the team that are looking to coordinate that. So within that, we have provisions for a range of sort of partnerships with private entities, and you mentioned Future Post as an example. That's the type of company that we are actively engaging with to look at the downstream opportunities in terms of what you do with the product. From a cost management point of view, the collecting, it's the easy part. It's what do you do with it from there, which is why a lot of councils don't collect it. It goes straight to landfill. So I think we do have a pretty good handle on it, and always happy to engage with passionate members of the community and groups around what we can do and how we can do it better. But I think we do have a good plan in place. Obviously, it doesn't get fixed overnight, but our waste minimisation plan is a 6-year plan with a lot of things happening in those first few years. And if you go for a look down Kawakawa Road, which I know you have, you'll see the beginnings of some quite innovative waste management down there. So.
Great, thank you. To open it up, are there any questions of Sue? Councillor Short.
Thank you very much, Sue, and I agree. Thank you very much for your passion and caring for the environment. How do we get everyone else to feel the same way? And do you know any I'll ask a couple of things and you can put it how you like. Do we know any statistics about, the regulations when we can no longer have supermarket bags in shops? Do we have any data that says how much that took out of landfill? And I've been around here a long time, and it's just really hard to get people to embrace recycling, and some groups are worse than others. I live in a farming community and I still see my neighbours going out with a pit out the back of the farm and burning it and stuff. So how do we get everyone else to be as environmentally conscious?
Yeah. Thank you, Alison. I think there are a number of ways. I think bottom up and top down are valid responses. I think everybody from the cradle to the grave involved in any material that we end up having to throw away needs to be involved. So it's an integrated approach. Council's opportunity is to have policies and bylaws and things like that, like licensing your waste operators so that you can actually have an idea. You have the ability to audit that larger proportion of the district's waste, which we currently have no knowledge on. Council's opportunity is also to employ a full-time waste minimisation person to do all sorts of honed methodologies like community-based social marketing, and which are behaviour change programs, which bring about behaviour change. Awareness, all the research says that awareness does not change behaviour. So we don't want to raise awareness. That is just flying some expensive flag, and we don't want to race. We're not wanting council to waste ratepayers' money. But there are many, and I've done one with paper recycling in Auckland. I've done one with attendance at our hazardous waste collection, and enormous, like doubled participation in them and things like that. And there's community-based social marketing, in my opinion, is the way to go. And a small group like ours don't have the resources to do that sort of research. It doesn't matter who does it, whether it's the community or the council, but people need to understand, well, what are the reasons that people don't have the behaviours that are needed, and then actually address them specifically. And the research also says that there is no one demographic of society that cares more about the way we manage the environment and minimise our waste than another. No ethnicity, it's a value that people have, whether they're rich or poor, whether they're red or yellow or black or white, that it's a value that people have. And there's just an enormous volume of things, and that's why we encourage the council to include the waste assessments proposal of a waste minimisation staff member in-house. It wasn't adopted in the waste plan, but that was our encouragement to you as councillors. because that's within your power to choose. But community groups like ours, I mean, like we definitely are going to have 2 public meetings with our $1,200 from the Waste Not Whatnot Fund. And there are all sorts of things. Like I was just having a look at the Kate Meads's cloth nappy webpage the other day, and she's a sort of inspiring woman that goes around and talks to young families and shows them how easy it is to use the modern cloth nappies that don't need any folding or anything special done to them. And there's a net cost benefit of going to those modern cloth nappies over single-use disposable nappies. So nappies, I think, are something crazy like 11%. Can't remember. Sanitary. Oh no, that's sanitary paper. I think 11% of the average rubbish bag, not total waste to landfill, is nappies, and there's an increasing volume of adult nappies.
Thank you. Final question from Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Actually, that was a question I was going to ask, is around reusable nappies, actually. And but in terms of is there any data in terms of people that actually, there's obviously clearly a part of society that actually do embrace. Is there any data around showing, people that perhaps grow their own vegetables, recycle, or actually compost, compost food waste, grow vegetables? And I imagine those people are probably good recyclers, I would suspect. Is there any data around, the percentage of communities that actually have people really embracing it?
Yeah, well, the bigger councils like Auckland have bigger waste minimisation budgets, and they've done 2,000 people phone surveys and face-to-face interviews and things like that. And so they, I could find the data from Auckland if you wanted, because it would just give you an example. So what you do is you say, okay, these are the people that are already running with it. These are the people that are open to it but are not actually changing their behaviour. These are the people that will never change their behaviour, no matter, even if you paid them, they won't change their behaviour. So a good statistician, somebody who knows how to run good research, will tell you that there's very defined groups in society, and I think the target market is to work with the willing and not preach to the converted, because you people, you must hear all these sorts of things all the time, and you don't need to be educated yourselves, but to change the community's behaviour is harder than you think, and it's a long-term thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue and Bridget. Thank you. And this is a really good example of council and the community working together in partnership to help change people's understanding and to actually put it into practice. So as you've heard Hamish say, we are working on some initiatives, but it's great to have groups like yourself coming in here and challenging us and putting new ideas on the table. So thank you for the time and effort, and thank you for your passion, and keep it up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Hamish will sort that.
Great, thank you. So moving on into our agenda, there are no presentations, no notification of late items or recommendations from committees or minutes from other committees for our information. So we can go straight to our officers' report. And so on item 11, the 11.1, the first one up on page 11 is the Manfield Park Trust. This is their 6-month report to the end of last year. So I welcome the team on board. Hamish is just changing hats and joining the team. So welcome to Kathy and Stefan, and I'll hand it over to you. So we have your report, take that as read, and happy to hear any highlights, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just introducing for those that haven't met, we've got Stefan Speller, one of our trustees. I was hoping that Stella Coleman was going to be joining us this morning too, but she must have been tied up with her other day job. And apologies from both Kevin Hanson and from Amanda Lindsay, our other two trustees. And I think Kathy's well known to all. As you say, take the report as read. Kathy's going to speak to some of the highlights in that. Just a couple of points from the board and from myself as chair that I just want to mention. So one of the things we've talked about in the past is the value of Manfield Park to the wider community and that community multiplier that the park brings. We had one good example of that just recently with the third round of what was the Toyota Racing Series. They do quite a bit of sort of publicity around the tracks they're at. And so anyone that's a motorsport fan that happened to be watching TV on a Sunday afternoon, they picked up some really good PR work that had been done through CEDA and through their own endeavours. And so as part of introducing the racing series on the TV, they did a really good showcase of fielding in the Manawatu district as well. So that gets in front of a large audience nationwide as well as overseas as well. So those types of things, those types of events, it's really hard to quantify that. In terms of what the value of that is, but I'm certain it's not a negative value when you've got fielding in the Manawatu being showcased in those sort of international events on a really good positive light. So one example, and we'll have many more of those going forward. One thing that Manfield Park Trust doesn't have, which is distinctly different from the CCOs of MDC, is that sort of letter of engagement, letter of intent sort of framework. Where council spells out what it wants and the entity spells out how it's going to deliver it and what it's going to do. It's an area that as a board and certainly with Kathy as the CE, we've worked through. We're conscious that the board does receive some operational funding and financial support through from MDC. And I guess we report to council on a 6-monthly basis and the accounts are audited so you can see what we're doing and there's a good level of interaction there. What we'd like to explore is some sort of formality around that. And I'm not necessarily talking a formal letter of expectation as you'd expect from the CCOs that council has, but just getting some structure around the money that Manfield Park Trust receives from Manawatu District Council and putting some structure so that we can ensure that the efforts that we're making, both as a management team and as a board, are aligned to that funding and contributing to what would be a sort of a wider community outcome as part of council's events funding, economic development funding across a range of parties. And I think that would help to sort of align some of the other funding streams with the likes of FDP and CEDA and some of the internal works that council does in that kind of event and promotion space. So I guess we flag it. We're happy to make a start on that and bring something through the various forums back to council. But we'd certainly invite council's input in that in terms of what you'd like to see for your money that you're investing on behalf of the community. So happy to hand over to Kathy to run through some of the key points of the report.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. And just to pick up the last point that Hamish raised, we're very keen to look at expectation, obligation, dialogue with all our settlors so that we can better define the role that we play to support the guardians. We're the guardians of the land of those settlors. And it just helps us understand, what is expected of us and also what our obligations are of our settlors. And I think it's a very good point, and we have talked at length at the board table about the need for this. And I think it would be very helpful, certainly for management moving forward. So I just want to reflect on the last few days, and we received quite a lot of interest and feedback. How did Manfield fare during the recent weather issues? And historically, I think we've often been on the back foot with that. The investment that we're now making in infrastructure reinvesting some of our surpluses back into our assets is paying dividends. And certainly the 80,000 plus that we spent on repairing and retrofitting our stadium roof, that building is completely watertight. And I think there was a really good example this week where historically we would have had issues with that. But the investment that we've spent in the stadium, that building is completely watertight and we had absolutely no issues. In fact, we're continuing with our events program with significant events this weekend. And so, I think we've come a long way in the last few years, making sure that we are fit for purpose. We've still got a long way to go, but we're certainly on a positive path with that. We're presenting our 6 monthly report. We're still on track to present a surplus at year end. We paid off another $16,000 worth of debt last month. So we keep sharing with you our ongoing debt repayment program. And it's always really positive for the management team and the board when we retire debt. One of the very interesting things that we have never shared with you before, because it's never happened, is that normally when we are doing future bookings for Manfield Park, we're looking a year out. So we would be booking 2024. We are now actively booking 2025. So that is absolutely a full turnaround from a position. Manfield's never been in that situation, and we are fully booked for the next 18 months. There is no weekend spare. And it's really, really, well, it sort of spurs our team on really, because, now we're booking, we had to open a new book for 2025 because we, have bookings going out, and that's sort of related to the success that we're having in repeat business, but also our clients are now recognising that if they don't take their spaces quickly, then they will be taken up by other clients. And I think that's a very good position that we're currently in. So I'll take my report as read. Obviously, we're really proud of the hosting of the Toyota Racing Series again. And one of the things that we worked very hard with the media was to make sure that Manfield wasn't fielding and it wasn't in Palmerston North. And there's no disrespect at all to our Palmerston North colleagues, but we have worked really, really hard to get that fielding name, and certainly in the cameo that was aired on Saturday and on Sunday prior to the live racing, which was televised internationally. We got loads of fielding mentions. So, I think we're on a positive path. We're happy to take questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you. Yes, I do have a question. And the great work that's being done and the profile and showcasing of Manfield and fielding internationally, the bit that I have ongoing concerns about is how do we engage our local community to be proud of Manfield, who it is, support it, and put it in a light. How do we engage? And I know it's a really hard one because you and your team and limited resources on the ground are beavering away, getting your venue and helping support those events that are booked into you. But how can you talk to me about what work Manfield's doing with the likes of FDP and other community groups to link together? And if you take the big Toyota meeting recently, did the rest of the town know about it? There was nothing happening in the square to engage with the drivers or those kind of things. And I'm just thinking there's a link missing here that maybe you're working on it. So I'd love to hear about that.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we are working on it, and we don't necessarily, we work forward. We've engaged with fielding and district promotion. We're part of the security team. We're on that subcommittee, so we're actively working alongside FDP regarding the safety and security of the district, because we're positioned in a good place, and we're working on installing CCTV cameras at the park as well, so that we can mesh up and provide our support for the district. We have a wee way to go in the marketing. We acknowledge that. I think Rome wasn't built in a day. We have some good partners that we're working with. And one of the things that we've been doing from a management team is seeking some specialised external marketing support to help us to rebuild the profile of what Manfield does. And I think, we have expertise within our team, but at times we need to reach out beyond that. And that's a piece of work that we're actively involved with now. Do you want to comment on that?
That too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, and I think it is a really good point, and it's a challenge, and it has been, as you know. And I think if you think, as I said, around a letter of expectation and that alignment of what council wants from us, and clearly we know that's part of it. But I guess it's the alignment of that with the other stakeholders and the contracts that council has with the other entities as well, and having a really clear picture of what that package looks like. And so it's not just one party having to sort of try and do all the work, and then there's actually a group of interested parties that are working together for a shared outcome there. I think that's really helpful, and that's an area that council could help us with as well. So
Thank you. Open it up for any further questions. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Good to see bookings out to 2025 starting on. Do you manage to wangle deposits out of people every time they make a booking? Is that standard practice?
Absolutely standard practice. If they don't pay their 50% deposit, they don't get a booking.
Excellent. That's so the other question I've got is around the use of the stadium. What percentage of current use of the stadium requires a hard surface, if at all? You probably know where I'm going with this.
Well, I do. I think our number of agricultural events that we hold is still high. I think we have some work to do around larger events that, probably the major one that we would do would be the craft market currently. We've certainly got more work to do regarding attracting larger events that may not necessarily need a dirt surface.
So what you're actually saying is that the current lime surface, or whatever it is that you use, is the predominant use of the stadium, and you see that being that way going forward in the future?
No, we don't. It is at the moment, but it's certainly an area that we're working on to attract larger events that are, represent a diversity in the type of events that we're holding in the stadium.
Thanks, Kathy. Cheers.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Tēnā koutou. Firstly, congratulations on the repetitive business and the bookings that you have to 2025. That's a reflection of your team and the stadium, all the work that's been done, particularly if marketing is an area that you want for improvement. That's a huge achievement. So ngā mihi kia koutou. I think I have a question. I think it's timely because of what's been happening in the last few days. Has Manfield considered being an emergency crisis accommodation, or a space of which we're it's a pivotal space for anything to do with flooding and those kind of things, Hamish?
Probably have two hats on for this one. From a civil defence emergency management perspective, yes, Manfield Park is identified as one of the facilities that we would use as a go-to following a large event, be it a flood or an earthquake. That's multi-use in terms of running an emergency operations centre, if this building was unavailable, for example, and or providing a welfare support for evacuated residents or support in that kind of community space as well. So yes, it is on on the current list of MDC's assets to lean on, and certainly an open door from Manfield Park Trust to be available for that. And I guess you'd expect that if there was a major flood in Feilding, if there was an event that was scheduled for Manfield, it wouldn't be happening, and therefore the space would then by default be available for that purpose. Yeah.
Wonderful. And as I alluded to right at the start, it's been the first area of our business that is now watertight.
Yeah.
It would be useful.
Good for
Thank
us
you.
to know.
And I think a really good example was the 2004 floods, where Manfield as a venue was absolutely key to welfare, not only for response, but in the recovery phase for a long time.
Mm. And also our strength during the vaccinations and
Absolutely, yes.
COVID
Great
response,
example.
particularly for our iwi and Pacifica communities.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for your report. Couple of questions regarding your numbers, of course. I noticed you're over. This is up to December, so you do have quite a few big events through November, December. Early summer, but you've obviously had some big events since then. Some quite big ones. But my question is. The numbers you present here, your overhead expenses are up quite a bit, and I wonder if you could explain that. And the second thing was the National Driver Training Centre, the income's well down. What's the reason for that?
So a 6-monthly report is a point in time, and I'll just refer to the figures for the National Driver Training Centre, because it was very interesting report putting this together, because we're talking about 2021 in a COVID environment, and we're talking 2022 for the comparative data. During 2021 for the National Driver Training Centre, that was when the new Countdown Distribution Centre was established in Palmerston North. And we had a partnership with Primary Connectors, it's called now, to train all the forklift drivers. So we did a partnership with them to do a recruitment drive from August through to October. And we were doing some weeks, we were doing 4 forklift movements. So that large figure for NDTC related to that contract that we had. And so BAU for the National Driver Training Centre, it is a profitable business unit, as we've reported to council before, but probably not at the level that we did at that specific time for that specific purpose. And overheads, a lot of that relates to infrastructure work that we've done in this 6-month period, and the stadium upgrade, the roof was included in that period.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a fan and disciple of Manfield Park, I'm very excited to hear of the direction of the park and the progress that's happening. And I congratulate you on the Manawatu Business Chamber event that you held last week, and your presentation, Kathy. I thought it was outstanding and extremely well received by a number of people that I've perhaps never seen before as well. So congratulations. You made a comment, something like the park is fully booked for 18 months. Is that in certain areas or across the board, or I'm assuming that I'm asking that wouldn't apply to the stadium, would it? So just seeking a little bit of clarification around that.
The track is fully booked,
Yes.
so we cannot take any more weekend bookings for the track for 18 months.
Yes.
In terms of the stadium, we are starting to fill up bookings during the week, which we haven't had before. So that's the area of opportunity in our marketing, is to start to fill more actively during the week. And we don't mind if they are smaller corporate meetings. It's the engagement with those clients, and the percentage of repeat business is growing markedly. So, people try us once, they like us, we get a repeat booking, and that is happening more frequently. And we're really pleased about that because we aim to deliver a high quality service.
And do you know how many events you host a year across the park? And I think it's important from a perception point of view. When I was involved on the trust, I think a lot of members of the public thought there were 20 or 30 events a year. There were, in my day, 400 or thereabouts, but I'd just be interested to know currently, even looking forward, it would be fine.
We're over 400,
right.
And I think historically, when on my watch, I wasn't overly comfortable with the definition of what an event was historically, and I certainly am very respectful of my predecessors, but a board meeting is not an event. So, you know, I mean, we hold board meetings, you know, 10 a year, and we hold our AGM, but we do not count that now as 11 events. So an event is where we have an external client using our facilities in some shape or form. So I think when we're reporting to council, and now we've got comparative data, you can have confidence that we're putting a lens across all of that too.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. Great to hear, Hamish, you're talking about that letter of intent. And I think something that would be really useful for us to understand is that community multiplier segmented perhaps by event type. And I wonder whether that's some support maybe council would need to provide in order to understand that. That's kind of more of a statement than a question.
Happy to receive any support.
Okay. My question is, we recently learned about the significance of this land to Ngāti Kaupata. Do we have any relationship with Ngāti Kaupata around its use and development?
I can do, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we do link in with Dennis and the team frequently. We've provided the mobile home training with when Ngāti Kaupata purchase the health vans. So we've provided that. We've had discussion about extending that wider cross boundary, and we're very comfortable to do that. And the forklift training in particular, and allowing or assisting to make our people more work ready. We're engaged in that discussion as well. You know, and often that's a very costly exercise. So we're engaged in that discussion as well. So yes, we have ongoing discussions, and we have a completely open door for anything that is useful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to add to that, and that's the key point there. In addition to that, we had the vaccination days where we had Kōwhara run events for local whānau. But I think the last point that Kathy made, the door is absolutely open to further opportunities in that space. We don't have an iwi engagement plan or strategy in that context, but certainly that door is open if Kōwhara as an iwi would like to be part of a conversation around that. So
thank you.
Great. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you. Recently I engaged with a national driver training course, and I had a group of young people that wanted to get into driving. But the dates weren't particularly, we didn't have a lot of events, but I just pass on the appreciation of how they tried to assist them in working to offer alternatives. And also the cost to enter for some of them was quite high to run the course. And appreciate the openness to be able to bring in an external vehicle to cut the cost. So it was very proactive, and I think that was really a good contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Quigley.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, well, first of all, you're doing a great job. Well done. Oh, sorry. You're doing a great job. But the word on the street is that Palmerston North seems to benefit a lot more from these events than Fielding. If that's true, how can we change that? We want these people to spend their money in Fielding, not so much Palmerston.
I love this question. Thank you. And thank you very much for raising it. Yes, considerable benefit goes into the city, and we're very pleased that we're a regional facility. So that's beneficial for our wider region. However, the issue that we have, and this comes back to Mayor Helen's question, is the provision of accommodation in the district. And it could be an FDP project, and certainly we're engaging with CEDA, but we would like the district to consider more Airbnbs, more farm stays, more opportunities for our visitors to stay in the district. And a lot of our motorsport guests have vehicles, they have trailers, they have equipment, and we are completely positioned, well positioned with farming families to host these people, because there's space and on farms that could park these vehicles. So we have not been proactive as a district to try and increase the offering of accommodation, and we can be as inventive as we like. Timona Park is fantastic, and the way that council has opened that up for motorhomes is great. Certainly camping would be fantastic, not necessarily at Manfield always, but definitely the Airbnb, the engagement of the community and creating a database that we could house our own guests in the district would be a dream come true.
And thank you, Councillor, for raising that. And that is a really key point, because that is the key to unlocking the value of the community multiplier for the ratepayer investment into Manfield Park. If people staying locally, shopping locally, spending their money locally in Fielding and the district, that's the key to getting that real value add.
Thanks, team. And that takes us back to what you opened with about the thinking about a letter of engagement, about what the specific expectation and outcomes are. And I think that's a really good way to raise this and to engage the community, but also better connect the other organisations with Manfield to support you, because, I think back to the time at the information centre, there was a database that we used. I think it was to do with the stock car champs, and we knew every house in the district who were happy to host somebody. And so we need to, pick those kind of things up and take them further. So I, for one, would be very keen about looking at what that letter of expectation or engagement or whatever we call it. And I heard from you, Hamish, that Manfield was happy to lead that and perhaps come back with a draft.
Very happy to do that. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good way forward. So with that, thank you for your report and for the discussion that we've had around it. There is a recommendation on page 11, and I'm very happy to move that the Manfield Park Trust 6-month report to the 31st of December 2022 be received. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ford. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. So thanks, team. Keep up the great work, and look forward to working closely together.
Thank you, Your
Take
Worship,
it to the
and
next
thank you,
level.
Council.
I think Councillor Quigley could be part of the solution to the accommodation
Yes.
for this big house.
Thanks, team. Thank you very much. Well, you could argue that with all of our elected members. There's the challenge, open the doors.
We tried that. My wife went to a stage of wanting to run a bed and breakfast. And the problem was we're too far out of the way to actually make it successful. But to actually link in fact, most of the people that stayed based at Manfield.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
came and
right.
based themselves.
It's
to
about giving
exactly,
people
yeah.
options.
They really just wanted to come out the country.
Yeah.
Somewhere to park their vehicles that were safe.
Excellent. Yeah, there's heaps of potential. So let's pick that one up and carry that one on. Right. We are up to 11.2. This is our team from Sport Manawatu. So welcome, come and join us at the table. Thank you for your report. We have read that, so please take that as read. Look forward to you highlighting anything out of your report, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I'd like to introduce Kelly Shanks, who's the Chief Executive, and Chip Letter.
Thanks, Kelly and Chip. So I'll hand it over to you.
Kia ora tātou. Thanks for having us along today. It's a real privilege to be here. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge all the flooding and the effects of the cyclone and the wonderful job that you guys have done in response to that. And if there is anything that Sport Manawatu can do to help, we are more than happy to redeploy some people so that we can help in any way that we can to support the community. Thank you. Chip, would you like to talk about some highlights through that?
Okay, thank you very much for having us here today. It's good to see start for those that remember that this is actually this year's report. Unlike last time when we were here, we had a little bit of, yeah, but I've never used one of these. We'll go up or to the right.
To the right, I think.
The middle one.
Middle.
Okay, so that photo there was a day that we held at Makino Pool. It involved a lot of the special needs schools from throughout the whole region, down to Taradua College, Manawatu College, Fielding, and we grabbed them all together and had a really fun day at Makino Pool using the great facilities that they've got in the green space out the back. And then we actually took them inside and had a swim for about an hour and a half. So I think that's just a great example of bringing a lot of groups together and using what we've got just out the back there. And the great facilities and the potential that can be utilised.
Talk about anything, yeah. That's the middle. That's the middle one. Yeah.
So just a couple of the highlights that we're able to use this year. Again, another awesome event that we had at Makino there. We've done a fair bit of engaging with the help of Think Hey Order. And also with some of the Te Manawa funding. And we were able to grab about 30 members of the local Bhutanese community. And we also engaged with a business called Splash Save. Splash Save are all about water safety. It's not so much learning to swim, it's water safety for environments where we have a lot of water around us. Unfortunately, too much water at the moment. But the confidence that these people were able to gain, a lot of them had never swum before. There was a lot of different ages, a lot of children, all the way up to some of the elders of the community. And as you can see there, it was helped to reduce the fear of water and hopefully address some of the drowning related deaths and injuries that are sustained in the local waters. It was an absolutely awesome program. And there's some continued communication with them, and we're going to be planning another one and with some other local groups as well. One that is very near and dear to Mayor Warboy's heart is Cactus Program. I firstly would like to congratulate what you do on that. Got to see firsthand, maybe not so much the 6 o'clock mornings that we had to endure sometimes, but what the students got out of that program. Some things are immeasurable, and at times that's one of them. They just leaps and bounds. It's not all about numbers in that program. It's about what they get out of it for themselves and then what they get out of it for their whānaus. It was an absolutely awesome program to be a part of, and I thank you for allowing Sport Manawatu and myself to be a part of it. Some of the discipline that they got from day one, just a little story on that. I remember the very first morning I turned up, one of the girls had an itchy nose and she scratched her nose, and the leaders from the Ohakia base were quite harsh on her for scratching her nose because they didn't say she could. Her face was not very responding to that. Towards the end of the program, the respect that she had been able to give to her leaders and the growth of her and all of the students, you could just see it on their faces, and no one was scratching their noses out. As you can see there was 5 different community groups that we worked with, received over $65,000 of Te Manawa funding in this period as well, including that program there from Splash Save and Cactus as well, with some other ones. Footsteps was another one. I was able to work with Newbury School in this period. We had 43 students that we took down. They had a camp down at Foxton. And we were able to go down there and do some safety skill program with the students and some of the parents and everything as well. So that was led by Nigel, who is our active transport lead, and myself. And we did some off-road sort of bike riding, as you can see by the photo. And we're able to upskill these kids enough to be able to take them on the road from the Foxton Christian camp down to the skate park along the road and along the water there, and then back again. And can happily say that no one fell off their bikes. So yeah, and also did some safety checks, helmets, bikes, taught them some skills along not just riding, but how to ride safely, and then hopefully be able to utilise the roads and what we have around the area for them to continue riding. So this one here, Play Week was held in November, and that's a nationwide initiative. So we were able to go down to Tangi Moana School and ran a pop-up play. Excuse me. For the teachers and the students, they were able to again cycle from the school down to the beach, and they were given 2 hours of free play just to be kids, just to run around, enjoy. We also took some interactive games down for them to enjoy as well, and I mean they had an absolute ball. It just shows that play is such an important part in not just a child's upbringing, but also for the adults to be able to involved with those children, and probably some of us forget how to play ourselves. So it's good to get rid of all the inhibitions and just be free and be fun. Have a good relationship with Replay Sports, and they've generously donated equipment packs that I've been able to distribute throughout the Manawatu district. Just some little padded tennis bats, some balls, chalk for sidewalk drawings, bubbles, little things like that. And I was also able to donate to pass out some cricket kits to different organisations and to different groups, so they can just get out and have some fun again. And obviously the regional sport facility plan review is underway. And yeah, there's no enough about that. One of the big things I think that's probably one of my massive highlights from the last 6 months is we were able to get a holiday program up and running. It wasn't just a normal holiday program. We were able to work with local providers, local community groups and local sporting groups, but we're also able to utilise the Te Manawa funding to be able to fully fund this program. So we went out in search of the schools that we deal with through our Healthy Active Learning initiative. So they're the decile 1 to 4 schools. In this case, it was Lytton Street and North Street. We had 60 spots open for the holiday program, and those 60 spots filled up like that. It was a 3-day program that was based at Makino, but it was held at the Civic Centre, the Green Space, and Makino. The morning was full of activities from groups like, you can see there, Max from Footsteps. We utilised the rec room to do that as well. We had Snap Fitness, some Bridget's Indoor Bowls Club, and a couple more just slipped my mind, sorry. But we had 6 different groups coming in. A Rural Badminton Association was another one. So that was over 3 days, and the feedback and the effort of all our staff, including the Makino staff, to get that up and running was just sensational, and we'll definitely be looking at expanding and running that again going forward.
Can I just jump in?
Please do.
Because I think, you know, one of the main ideas is it's not just running a holiday program. The idea is reducing the barriers to children that wouldn't normally be able to access some of these sports or opportunities, connecting them to local providers so that they can actually have opportunity to then engage and remain engaged. So that's kind of the key outcome of what we're trying to do with that program. And I think there's lots of opportunities to expand on that, because there's lots of children that don't get the opportunity to engage, and how can we reduce those barriers? And through our connections further in the community that we'd like to expand on, and with our multicultural iwi hapu connections, and actually how can we provide these opportunities in response to what the kids themselves want to learn about too, because it's important to understand what the kids would like to take part in, rather than just going, we're going to supply these opportunities, here you go, hope you like them. No, it's actually about understanding what they would like to engage with, and actually how to make it sustainable for them. We don't want to present opportunities that then they can't continue on with, because that defeats the purpose.
Very much so. And also just another one there down the bottom, for the first time also this year, we were able to secure the North Island Ultimate Frisbee Champs, which we held at Timona Park. It's quite surprising. Ultimate Frisbee is quite actually a big sport, a lot bigger than probably a lot of us realise. As you can see there, over the 2 days, we had over 250 participants. There was 13 teams all the way up North Island. I'd like to thank Carl and his team for helping us secure Timona Park. I guess that was a little pet thing of mine, as in we were able to take it away from Palmerston. So they were actually in talks to have it, and I got in first and made sure we had it here. They were quite impressed, and hasn't been 100% confirmed, but it looks like we may have secured it for the next 4 or 5 years to be held here as well.
Awesome.
So
Well done.
quite chuffed with that one. So just moving on with some future priorities, as mentioned, obviously the school holiday program again. You may remember the very successful bubble bingo that we ran last year, which obviously worked very well because we were in a state of lockdown. We're actually promoting that, and it starts again on the 6th of March. So we're running that again. We are currently in the process with MDC of, through Te Manawa funding, gaining a play trailer, which we will then be able to have out for bookings for groups, holiday programs, birthday parties, sports clubs, prize givings, whatever they want, school groups. And that'll be packed full of play equipment, which we can then, you know, give out to the community. We can work out how we do that exactly. Another big thing coming up, which is actually on the 24th of March, is the Mount Biggs Tough Kids. You may be aware that they generally would have about 600 students from across not just Manawatu, but other regions as well. Unfortunately, last year, due to COVID, that had to be canned. But we've been in the planning process again, and we're actually looking at upping that to 800 registrations this year. So there were a few that missed out. We're trying to encourage as many as we can. So that's the next big thing as well. And obviously the completion of the regional sports facility plan review.
The other piece of work too is working with your wonderful Lynn Daly and team, just looking at the strategy. Obviously health and well-being is a key focus area for yourselves as well as us, and so there's great opportunity to come together through your review of your strategies as well as ours, and look at how we can collectively work better together in targeted areas.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you do. Yes, love the photo. And yeah, and thanks Sport Manawatu. I think having Sport Manawatu to be able to link in with all these little activities and little groups, whether they're volunteers or not, being able to link to Sport Manawatu strengthens each of those programs. And I know Cactus was exactly the same in being able to get some funding to buy the right sort of mats to do the work that they do there, which then the school use on a day-by-day basis. Those kind of links are really important. Those are partnerships. So thank you for that. Open it up for questions or comments. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you. fantastic report to read. Thank you. It's so great to hear about all these amazing initiatives in our community. I've got a couple of questions. The first is, do you collect statistics on participation in the programs by demographic, different things? I'd certainly be interested to see that sort of information if it was available in the future. You're nodding your head, so I'm assuming.
So I was waiting to see who was going to. Yes, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so at our end of year one, we will absolutely bring that. I think it's really important. I'm really keen on insights and data. I think it's really important. And so we also have our participation survey, which is a much wider survey too, because obviously if we don't, if we can't see any impact, then how do we know what we're doing is the right thing? Right? So yes, absolutely. And demographics is really important. And that's where we can work with other partners like yourselves, as well as Think and others, to actually have collective data to paint a really good picture, because it's not just about participation, it's also about understanding the other things that are happening in people's lives and our communities. So bringing it together is really important.
Well, that leads me beautifully to my second question, which is about, and I know this is hard, how does Sport Manawatu measure outcomes?
Yeah, and that is hard, right? For sure, but in lots of different ways, I guess. So feedback from the community is always a good one. Then obviously surveys. We also go out and do statistical. We have Sport New Zealand data as well that is supported in regards to that, and feedback from our key partners. Is there any other?
And perhaps would you include that in the end of year report?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden.
What's really great when you do your annual awards is you celebrate the officials, the referees, the people, and it's often I feel that there's people there that perhaps can't participate in a sport but have a love of the sport and can actually contribute something back by refereeing or supporting. Is there a program where you, because it's from what I gather, it's in most sports they struggle for that. They struggle to have referees and people to assist. Is that part of your program to try and attract people and show them that there is a good alternative to enjoying the sport by being an official?
That's a great question. And yes, and I guess the thing too is that, so we've got Chip here today, which is great, but obviously we have a whole team as well. And so with Sport Manawatu, it's not only Chip in the Manawatu, it's the whole lot. And so there are staff that particularly focus on coaching, refereeing, and they call it sort of like integrity in regards to this, there's a lot of things around sideline behavior because we want the kids to have a good experience, but we also want the coaches and referees to have a good experience, right? So there's a whole piece of work around that. And sport or recreation doesn't happen without referees or without coaches or without volunteers. So therefore, yes, it's a huge focus area and a huge piece of work that we're working on. So we will report on that as well.
Also, the photo that was up there of the children in the pool was actually during volunteer week, where I went around and showed a lot of the clubs and the volunteers the appreciation and gave them a small little gift sort of thing. And that was all the kids with the Dolphin Swim Club at Makino and their coaches who are all volunteers. So we do try to get out to a lot of the clubs and organisations and definitely let them know as well that we appreciate what they do and thank them for their hard work.
Because a lot of the kids obviously have an aspiration to go on to become professional sports people, and a personal experience with a grandson who's funding his way through university refereeing men's basketball.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
oh, fantastic.
And and that's an area where actually people can actually have a career or a way of funding their way through other ventures, and it gives them a lot of pleasure, not just the money.
It's definitely a personal thing for me as well. In a similar vein, my son is lucky enough to be a talented cricketer. Works very, very hard, but it's not cheap. And so he does a lot of coaching and a lot of side things as well, giving his time, but also does have a paid gig as well to be able to help fund, because, mum and dad can't help him fund it forever. He's got to, do it himself. He's 19, he's not 9, so he can get out there and do it himself. So I definitely, that coaching side of thing, the volunteer side of thing and the officials is, the sports and activities wouldn't happen if the officials weren't there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. A couple of things here. I note in your play and Palmy, 70% of kids go to school on a car or a bus. I'll be interested to know what the breakdown on the car bus thing is, because I think that's actually a lot of kids come on a bus because it's a route and it's quite a distance, whereas a lot of cars, I would imagine, is probably just possibly walking distance drop off. And the other question I've got is around what stops kids playing outside. And I see here 46% nearly too busy playing video games or on devices. And I'm wondering if there's any actual data, is that improving, getting worse? Is there any historical data that says we're either getting better at that or not?
It's an interesting one. First of all, with the travel, obviously we're very unique with the rural environment that we have. There's 24 primary schools, 25 primary schools in the Manawatu district. There's only 4 or 5 in Fielding. The rest of them, a lot of them, unfortunately, children can't ride their bikes there because they're on a 100-kilometre-hour road. They do live on farms that are quite a distance, so that definitely does make it hard in this area. With the video game one, it's video gaming is now in the Commonwealth Games. Video gaming is now considered by some a sport. Yeah, darts is a sport. Don't say darts. Yeah, well, anything you sweat in is a sport, apparently. So, I mean, is it getting better or worse? We're probably still a little bit early in that to be able to really tell. We do have, I do know personally a family friend of ours whose son gets paid to travel around the world playing video games. So without being a fortune teller, it's probably still has a bit to go. But that's why we're here, right? We need to be able to let people realise that there's alternatives, and being outside until your mum calls you in because it's dark because you're too busy playing out in your backyard or with your neighbours is still something that we can't lose hold of, and that we're still going to push and continue to push. And it's not just about sport, it's that active rec and that play side of things as well, which I think will really benefit the region when we do get the play trailer up and running, and we can start to push that out to families and community groups and different things like that. That I think that, we're always here to help fight that fight, so to speak.
Thank you. Final question from Councillor Short.
Thank you for your report. It is a very interesting read, and it's good to see so much participation post-COVID. So I was quite interested in the Tū Manawatu funding, and really pleased to see some of the things that you were able to do with it, and just wanting to know how long is that funding available for? Is it enough? Probably not. I was particularly interested in the holiday program that you did and the children that were able to access that, and also the water safety program you did with the Bhutanese community. There's a lot of low income households in our district, and I think really they're sprinkled everywhere. Don't just judge a school by its decile. You will find low income households at a decile 8+ school just as much, particularly in the rural areas. You drive down any road in the rural area and you'll get a high income household, and then single parent families, etc. But I'm the liaison councillor for Te Moana, so I was particularly pleased to see that you're going out there, because it's a very isolated spot and it's often overlooked, and they've got a great principal out there. It's just really around, is this funding continuing? Is there any chance it will increase? And is cost the main barrier to some families not participating in sport or transport? Or
Answer the first part.
Yep. So in regards to the funding, it is currently open at the moment, which Chip is helping push out to the community. So any community group, not-for-profit organisation is welcome to apply for that. And we are happy to help support that, because we really do want the money to go out. Will it increase? We don't know. It's Sport New Zealand funding, and they haven't indicated it at the moment, whether that they don't know either, whether it will continue. Because it was a pilot project, then it's all about, of course, proving the impact of it, right? So that's the phase we're in at the moment. So it's really important with this funding, when it goes out, that we do the evaluation of the impact, are able to take that, put it back to Sport New Zealand to be able to get a national case for change in regards to accessing that funding. The great thing about that funding is it is about play, recreation, sport, and it is targeted at the lower socioeconomic groups, communities, people. It is open till the 31st of March, I think, is when it closes. There's a big fund and a small fund. So the small fund is open all the time. That's for $10,000 and under. And then the larger fund, which is open at the moment, is up to 40. Chip. So it is really fantastic. And what we really want to do is make sure that Manawatu and the residents of Manawatu are actually able to access that and get some of that funding. So it's really fantastic that 65,000 went into the community, but let's see if we can do that, again, to make sure that they are benefiting that. In regards to if there is language barriers or if groups haven't filled out applications, because that can be a real barrier for people as well, knowing how to fill out the paperwork. Which is can be quite complicated, but it is a form that we've been given and we can't change. But what we can do is sit and support and help people fill that out to make sure that that is, does that.
As well as myself, we also do have a Te Manawa administrator at work who focuses on the applications, the assistance of people, but also goes through them. And what I think works really well is it's not a no, yes. It's a maybe not because of A, B, or C. I'll go back to that person and we'll talk about why. And we actually really do try to help people get in. It's not just a blanket no, see you later, never come back. Part of the connecting, I guess, through my role is from the Te Manawa administrator to then also let me know, and then I can go out to those groups and also help them as well. So right. Decile rating, that's another topic for another day.
But we do absolutely acknowledge that, yes, there's huge diversity and it's not just a case of, just a low decile.
Thanks, team. The passion and the achievement it's there. It's in your report. It's in the discussion that we've had, and we are just so fortunate to have people like you in our community doing that connection and getting our young people back to basics and enjoying just being kids, which is fantastic, and their family support. So with that, Councillor Short, would you like to move the motion on page 21?
I'll just find page 21. I'd like to move that the Sport Manawatu 6-month report for the period ending 31st December 2022 be received.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Blackmore. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. So well done. Keep up the great work, and look forward to keeping that connection with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, so we move to item 11.3. This is the deliberations on our traffic safety and road use bylaw 2023. So you will recall that we had 38 submissions, of which we had 3 come and speak to us. And so today is about receiving the officers' feedback on each of those submitters and the recommended response to each of those. So welcome, Brittany. Thank you for the work in pulling all this together. And so I'll let you just highlight that report and then we'll open it for discussion.
Great. Kia ora koutou to the Mayor and councillors and guests today. Welcome. So as Mayor Helen said, we have now concluded the consultation period on the traffic safety and road use bylaw. So today's job is to consider the results of public consultation. And there's 2 recommendations today, but we'll revisit those at the end because you may wish to amend them based on decisions today. So what I was planning to do is talk you through the consultation period on the bylaw. Then I thought we could go through each of the topics contained within the bylaw and then pause at the end of each topic for discussion amongst councillors. Is everyone okay with that? So we held the public consultation period between the 18th of November and the 16th of December. We received a total of 38 submissions. So we feel that's a reasonably good level of submissions. I think the topics were quite hard to understand for the general ratepayer or resident or community member. So that's a pretty good level. And 3 submitters spoke to elected members on the 2nd of February. So within the report, I'll take you through to section 5 on community engagement, and we'll come back to the other sections. So we were required to use a special consultative procedure when consulting on this bylaw. We did a number of things to spread the word about the bylaw with the community, with the assistance from Council's communications team. So there was visually engaging and appealing graphic design elements, web page and online collateral, radio adverts, press releases, newspaper adverts. We also had a number of social media posts which generated good engagement. You'll see some of the stats there on each of the different posts and some of the comments which we've summarised there. We targeted key stakeholders via direct correspondence. This included fielding and district promotion and the Manawatu Federated Farmers Provincial Group. So the Federated Farmers Provincial Group, we spoke with them one-on-one before we released the bylaw for consultation, and they also reviewed the proposed bylaw at their 12th of October meeting before it was notified. So taking you back to the issues consulted on with the community within the bylaw. So parking, probably what you guys will be most familiar with from those who spoke to us at hearings. So feedback from the community about parking did not oppose council's proposed powers to prohibit or restrict parking. Largely the feedback focused on parking issues perceived in the Fielding Town Centre. So this was, a lot of the submissions came through after a Stuff NZ article was released during consultation. So we received an influx following on from those articles. Although the proposed provisions include the ability for council to specify time limited parking via resolution, the bylaw does not specifically propose to do so within the Fielding Town Centre. So that's something council can decide separately, but the bylaw enables that decision. So we'll come back to that at the end of this section. Some feedback included a desire for council to allow parking on berms on narrow streets. I've just raised some key issues with that, including muddy berms and damage to associated curb and channels. So it's not recommended that council does move to allow vehicles on berms. And some submitters also commented on the need for more loading zones and also comment on the design of mobility parks within the town centre. So in response to this feedback, officers have made the decision to undertake a stock take of parking spaces in the town centre for specified vehicle classes. So that would involve someone doing counts of loading zones, etc., to see if there's need for more. So as officers, it's not recommended that changes be made to the proposed parking provisions in response to community feedback. This is because the majority of feedback received on this topic has been assessed as not appropriate to be addressed by the bylaw. As I mentioned previously, the bylaw enables these types of decisions. They can be made separately by council. However, just thinking about if you were to want to implement enforcement officers, before adoption, I'd like to go back to the legal reviewer to ensure that the bylaw gives them the powers they would require to enforce the provisions. So I'll hand it over to Councillors Mayor Helen to discuss parking and the submissions received.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's, I think probably we should have dealt with recommendation number 1, that the council considers and makes decisions on matters raised in submissions on the proposed traffic safety and road use bylaw 2023. So I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor McFadden. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Sorry, I should have done that procedurally first. So right, let's open it up, please, to discussion on these submissions and the recommendations from our team. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you. My comments relate specifically to CBD parking. And I want to recommend that we address the I guess, the frustrations regarding parking in the CBD, and that we do it forthwith. And I'm happy to be guided by Acting Chief Executive Brittany as to the best way of going about that. Procedure is not my strength, but I do. My main thrust is that I'd like us to make a decision whether my colleagues agree with me or not, and if they do, that we actually get on with it. So I have written to my colleagues with my thoughts. I don't intend to go back over particularly the background stuff, but the thing to note, I guess, is that parking has been an ongoing issue in the CBD. It used to be managed, I would say, 95% successfully for many years. And then in 2016, there was a change and things went backwards. And so by the middle of 2018, frustration levels were really high, came to a head. There was a public meeting called in the Fielding and District Promotion Office, and a parking action committee was formed, blah, blah, blah. Submissions were made to council, and there was a reasonable amount of media attention, but that was middle of 2018, and council undertook a parking survey, which I have circulated, and I'll just briefly talk to it. So part of the parking problem is real, and part of it is perceived, and part of it is laziness. So let's be, on a Friday, late morning through to early afternoon, we have a real problem with parking. We also have a real problem with some people, business owners and staff members, in my opinion, not playing the game fairly in terms of parking where customers should be parking. And that used to be sort of a 5 to 10% problem, but that has increased significantly because no one's actually policing it or doing anything about it. So it is a bigger problem than it used to be, but I believe it's easily fixed and it can be done rather cheaply. So we've heard from, I think we had a couple of really good submissions on the topic, and the problem is real, but easily fixed. Going back to the 2019-20 survey, we actually saw that and the town is sort of divided into shop-facing parking spaces, so we'll call them the really inner area, and then total number of parking spaces, which is a larger area. So if we go to our peak situation, 11 to 12 o'clock on a Friday, 86% of the inner area parks are occupied. So actually, even at worst, there were 14% still available. It is a few years old, but I don't think things have changed significantly. We go to the larger area and it's 81% occupancy. We go to, say, a Wednesday, and that quickly changes to larger areas 71%, smaller areas 77%. Saturday, we're right down to 52% and 65%. Now, those are the peak times on a Friday, a Wednesday, and a Saturday. The percentages are significantly lower than that out of the peak times. So when I say part of the issue is perception, small town people tend to like and expect to be able to park outside the place they want to go to. And many are not prepared to walk 50 metres, park and then walk 50 metres. Whereas you go to a larger city, you might walk a couple of kilometres. My mother-in-law was a great classic example. She'd leave home at Windsor Terrace, drive down. If she couldn't park right outside, she'd just go home and try again later. So there is very much an attitude thing. I'll call it laziness with a number of people. That will be, it's a little unkind because there'll be people who aren't as active and as able to get around. And so it is a very real issue for them. And I believe that we want to readdress mobility parks, possibly 5-minute parking or short-term parking for certain businesses, pharmacies, for example, possibly pie shops, where customers are in and out really quickly. And then I think we heard a very good submission in relation to loading zones and the problems with big trucks parked, which is real. So happy for those things to be addressed as well. I want to focus most of my attention to the just the people parking in the wrong place, in many cases all day. And don't lose sight of the fact that actually in the 20 years that I was involved, we collectively, Fielding Promotion and Manawatu District Council, actually added about 200 car parks to the town centre. And a lot of that was in terms of redesigning and actual adding of additional parking areas. So it has been worked on, and that doesn't include the New World supermarket, which adds a lot more, but very specific to the supermarket. So in my opinion, all that is needed is to identify the parks that should be left available for shoppers. Do we have this just this inner area and leave the outer area for all day parkers? But we need to identify them, create the bylaw, and whatever is you people recommend us, we do. Create, in my opinion, 3-hour time limit is the sweet spot with signage, and have this policed. But I believe it only needs to be policed Fridays, say 10 till 3, and randomly 1 or 2 days a week through the rest of the week, so that the guilty parkers don't know which day it's going to be, and basically through the middle part of the day. So we issue fines to the offenders, and the problem will be quickly solved, in my opinion. As soon as you hurt people in the pocket, we generally get some action. And I think we may even find that we can drop the policing back to less than 1 day a week. Our chief executive has suggested that a possible easy way of organising the policing is to actually contract Palmerston North, the people that do the Palmerston North monitoring of parking. We could start on a friendly basis with a warning for a few weeks to see how that goes. I probably personally consider that fines will be required to modify the bad behaviour, because I think there is a bit of an attitude problem with some of these people. As mentioned, I support the policing of disability parks, creation of new loading zones for delivery vehicles, and the ability to fine delivery vehicles not using the loading zones. I've mentioned 5-minute parking areas, etc. The other aspect that the Parking Action Group, which I was part of, found was that a number of the parks that are available for all-day parkers are not well lit, and they're down alleys, etc., and there is a safety issue. And I think as a council, we might be able to facilitate a big improvement with lighting, either even just getting building owners to improve the lighting on their down the sides of and the rear of their buildings, or maybe some of those rear car parks are actually council car parks, and we could look at improving some lighting. Being cognizant of the above point, I'd be comfortable to limit the 3-hour time limit to, say, from 9 till 3. This would allow business people, especially people who have safety concerns, and I'm particularly considering women, to move their vehicles to a well-lit position out the front of their premises for the latter part of the afternoon, when the demand for parking is considerably lower. And I noted just yesterday at 4 o'clock, I could have probably had any one of 200 or 300 parks. The place was a ghost town. Aligned with what we're doing here in terms of addressing the parking problem, I also support looking into further car parking opportunities to add to our town, and that is suggested in the town centre refresh. So I think that's an ongoing thing as well. But I don't believe we need to do further research, and in my opinion, that would just be kicking the can down the road again. We knew all this in 2018. Frankly, we haven't actually taken any action. So let's fix it now. Just to be clear, I don't support parking meters. I think it's very much part of our marketing of our friendly country town, free parking while you shop. But the time limit, I think it's now time to have a time limit. The other issue is who pays. From what I've said above, I believe the cost would be fairly minimal if the policing was limited, as I suggested. It could be part of the general rate, because actually the whole community benefits. It could go into the roading rate. or it could be a targeted rate payable by the business community. They do get hit with a number of targeted rates already, and they do pay, and there is a whopping differential for CBD businesses already. And given the small amount of money, it could be, in my opinion, probably absorbed into general eroding rate without anyone hardly noticing it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to this issue.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, like I fully support Councillor Ford's comments. Quite clearly, we have a problem. 15 of the 38 submissions related to the parking issues, in particular the shortage or pending, if you like, of certain people over parking in the CBD area. I do support the adoption of the bylaw as it stands. Clause 8 in there gives us the power to install signs and marking, and clause 9.1b gives us the power to limit the period of time. But I do note in the council papers that council at this time intends to do nothing, and I think that's, to be honest, a cop out. As Councillor Ford said, it's kicking the can down the road. It's ignoring the problem. Some of the submitters, in particular FDP, came to council and specifically asked us for assistance. I believe they've tried very hard to manage parking in the CBD, and despite their best efforts, have been unsuccessful. They've requested our help. We should provide their help. If FDP do not have any authority to control parking in the CBD, council does. Council is the only authority that has that power. So we need to take action, and I believe we need to take it now. I don't believe there's any need for further consultation as part of the town centre refresh. That again would just be kicking the can down the road. The people have spoken, the message is clear. We need to do something now. So I would be happy to add while the bylaw as it stands is fine and gives us the power to control parking, I believe we should add a further resolution that council introduce time limited parking into the Fielding Town Centre. Yes, it's rather disappointing that FDP have, as I mentioned, have tried their best, but in some ways just been told to F off by certain people. It's just not good enough. And I do support Councillor Ford's comments regarding random policing. It doesn't need to be full policing. I don't think we need paid parking, just some signage and whatever time limit is appropriate. I've talked to a number of CBD business owners, and the 2 to 3 hour time limit has been mentioned. For example, hairdressers, somebody doing a hairdressing appointment might need 2 hours. 1 hour is not enough. We've also got the movie theatre there, which 2 hours wouldn't be enough. So 3 hours probably is the appropriate time, I suggest. But council officers can have a look at that and make a determination.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Hamish,
Yeah.
okay. Well, so you won't lose sight of that specific one. Excellent. Okay, so we've got a number here. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. I support most of what Councillor Ford had to say in regard to his comments. The one thing I'd take issue with is the period of time of 3 hours. Where cities have parking meters, there is a limit on the amount of time that you can actually feed the meter without having to change the vehicle. And I don't believe in fielding that you need to sit in a parking space for more than 2 hours to conduct the business. You can have lunch, you can do some shopping, you can do a number of things. And if the whole purpose is to turn the traffic over, then 3 hours to me is too long. So I'd support something like 2 hours. The issue I'd have is where exactly you could see unlimited parking and where there is limited parking or limited time. So we need to be quite clear exactly what roads and where exactly those boundaries are. I think that's very important. And I had one other comment, I can't think of it. Yeah, and I'll pass on that at the moment, but just the clarification as to where the parking restrictions would be, and I'd support a 2-hour limit rather than a 3-hour limit.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Support Councillor Ford's, Councillor Campbell's comments. And I think clearly there's some work to be done on exactly where time restricted parking would go. But to be fair, if you're going to have a bit of a feed and go to a movie, 2 hours isn't going to cut the mustard.
No.
So, you know, those are the things that obviously need a little bit more detail. But the significant thing of importance is, in my view, that the communities ask us to just get on with this. And so we need to do that. Interestingly enough, Councillor Campbell's mentioned there was about 15 submissions, but I went through the 38 submissions and I noted there were actually 20 comments on parking, 11 on roading and traffic control, 2 stocks on roads, which actually tends to indicate that we've got that right. Roadside grazing 5, well, we've probably got that right as well. And vehicle crossings 15, which is another issue. But look, the point I wanted to raise was the issue of parking on berms. So I've got a couple of questions around that because I don't know that I actually support that. Kimbolton Road is a very good example of funerals, and people park on the median, on the grass, when there's a funeral on. We've lived just down the road from the funeral home for nearly 5 years, and I've never seen any damage done to the grass area between Kimbolton Road going north and Kimbolton Road going south. Denby Street is another area where there are mandated green berms that actually residents are actually encouraged to park on. So I actually do not support a blanket statement in the bylaw that actually prohibits parking on berms, because actually the benefit of actually people parking on berms sometimes is actually going to be more beneficial than perhaps the slight bit of damage that may occur from time to time. And look, at the end of the day, we would always hope that if the berms are muddy, wet and everything else, you know, goodness me, we would hope for a degree of common sense. And those in 4-wheel drives will probably have a crack, but those in 2-wheel drives will probably get stuck. But at this stage, I don't support a blanket ban on parking on berms.
Thank you. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support. Sorry, thank you. I support Councillor Ford's proposals and the other comments. The other area that I think that we don't allow enough for is young parents of young children with, like they have outside New World. You probably see now there's an area out there where there's space where you can unload your pram and you've got young children. And I think we need to actually consider that as well. Is it from a safety perspective? Because we don't really want that equipment being loaded onto the road. So I'd like to suggest that. I agree regarding the burns. We've heard how we want people to pay sport. You've only got to go past the sports fields on Saturday and there's not enough parking where there's all the kids running around the sports field and they're parking on the burns. So, you know, on one side, we're wanting to encourage them and on the other side, we're discouraging them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with all the comments that have been said so far, and thank Councillor Ford for the very considered discussion that he started with us. After the submissions last time, as many of you did, I went and saw Kate at Turnaround. She mentioned that several people have been in, and at a quiet moment, we walked out to the street and she pointed out some of the vehicles in a photo, and right then it was about, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 staff from a nearby beauty clinic walked out and their cars were 1, 2, 3 opposite the business, the other side. They were all under 30 and I bet you most of them were going to the gym next. I certainly agree that place that she suggested for a loading zone, I don't know how that works for traffic management, looks pretty logical to me when you see that. Perhaps we could be friendly fielding, and the repeat offenders who are a bit slow to adhere to it, instead of giving them a parking fine, well, as well as a parking fine, maybe we could shout them a B card and suggest that they go by bus. And the other one I just wanted to mention was disability parks. I think it's not so much what's in the bylaw, but I think we've got to be really careful planning mobility parks. I've got one friend who's tetraplegic and a family member who's in a wheelchair, and they won't park in some parks because they're actually not user friendly. Sometimes they're the driver, sometimes they're the passenger. It depends if the lips are right on the footpath. Sometimes it forces them to go behind parked cars to get up a lip. So I think I'd just like to highlight we need to be careful where we put mobility parks. They need to be user friendly and you know, parent and child parks, as Collins mentioned as well. We shouldn't just be putting mobility parks. Oh, look, there's a slightly bigger gap on that end. We'll just bump one in there, when actually it's got to be designed right. We've got an aging population, and I think we need to take those things in consideration. And perhaps we could actually consult with a couple of people who use those parks and ask for their advice, because they would no doubt go to other towns and see how things are done well there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Thank you. Brittany, I think you indicated earlier that there could be a legal problem around the enforcement of a time parking space, and if that is going to be a problem, then this bylaw wouldn't cover enforcement. And as Councillor Ford indicated, parking fines are probably going to be needed to change people's behaviour.
Yes, so basically what I'm thinking is that if council gives me a steer of what they intend to do today, I will go away and ensure the bylaw enables that. And if it doesn't, I'll work with the lawyer to insert new clauses that enable the direction you want to take. And then that is the version that will come back to adoption. I don't imagine much change is needed. I'll just want to double check, especially if enforcement officers are going to be involved. Hamish, you might have some thoughts on all of the comments today. And is there any other councillors that have any comments before we move to summarising some next steps?
Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, look, thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, sorry, I meant to also ask the question actually around state highways. So when I was talking about Kimbolton Road, which of course was a state highway, do our bylaws actually have any teeth on Kimbolton Road as part of state highway? Whatever it is, 54.
Yeah.
So the bylaw only relates to council roads.
So the point I made about people parking on the grass between Kimbolton Road is actually nothing that we can enforce regardless.
Yes, so on your comment about parking on berms, because we don't have enforcement, and likely a lot of the areas where people park on berms are residential areas, we would only enforce the bylaw if there were problems that we were seeing, like really muddy areas or damage to curb and channel. Otherwise, to be honest, we're not going to approach people to get them to move off. Yeah, so that maybe accommodate some of your concerns.
Thank you, Brittany. And I think on that basis, it seems to me pointless to have a bylaw that we're actually not going to enforce, except every now and then. My view would be it's easier not to have it. And so I thank you for the clarification around state highways. But my point around, or my objection to actually banning parking on the berms is still valid. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you. The question I was going to ask is, in fact, how much is it going to cost? Now, we've heard that it might not cost much, but how much is not much? And I think we need an answer on that as well.
Thank you. Let's take all the questions from any other councillors who haven't spoken, and then we'll pass to Hamish. Councillor Belsky.
Yeah, I appreciate all the writing's gone into this, and especially I support Councillor Quarry on a 2-hour parking. I think 3 hours too long. 2 hours is very adequate, and parking on berms is should be acceptable. Obviously, if it's really wet, they'll get stuck. But overall, I don't think there's been much damage on berms at all, and I think that would be wrong to do that. As far as having judder bars or speed limits, you've done the right thing, and that 50% of the people on that street have to agree to it. I noticed Ashurst now has got judder bars down their main street, and it certainly slowed the traffic down to what it was. Matt's on crossings. You've answered it really well. I would soon have seen some more pressure on underpasses, especially I go through about 3 or 4 dairy crossings getting here. But some of the mats are certainly pretty ratty now, and I believe you have got the power to make them get new ones or upgrade them. So overall, it's to me, yeah, I agree with a lot what you say, but a 2-hour parking would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Just picking up on a couple of points. There are 2 maps that already exist in terms of identifying the parking areas that at least previously we thought were appropriate to leave for customers and those that were suitable for all day parking. So that would be a good starting point. I'm not saying that's the final, but at least I don't think it would take much to tweak or adopt. And I think that the problem we're trying to solve is stopping people from parking all day. And we want to still be attractive and to customers who want to come and have a movie and a meal. And so but it's the people that park at 7:38 in the morning and are still there at 5 o'clock at night. They're the people we're wanting to address. And I think that the 3 hours would achieve that.
Thank you. Councillor Quigley.
Thank you. First of all, I do support everything you're saying. And I want to address the 2 and 3 hour issue. I've got a daughter and a daughter-in-law that are both hairdressers. And I dare say Andrew doesn't take 2 hours at the hairdresser when you go. I'd imagine Terry probably does you in 5 minutes, doesn't he? But a woman can take a long time at the hairdresser. I know this. So if you're coming into town to get your hair done and then you're going shopping, I mean, 2 hours is probably actually not enough. So I'd be a supporter of a 3 hour option.
Thank you. Just to add my comment, I totally support the discussion led by Councillor Ford. And I was just going to say that it was interesting, the ones that are suggesting 2 hours is okay are male gender. So, and I remember the discussion, we've got to be really careful. On one hand, we're not saying you can shop here, but make sure you don't go over the 2 hours. That's the message we do not want to send. We want to say that when you've got your hair done, and you walk past the dress shop or the coffee shop, you go, oh, I've got time to go do that. So we've got to be really careful that we're not sending a negative message around that. Now I'm going to pass it over to Hamish so then we can kind of wrap this up about where do we go from here.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yep. So there's probably 2 parts to the conversation. One is what does the traffic safety and road user bylaw enable? And then the second part is what are we going to do about it and when and how much it's going to cost. So I think in terms of bringing the report or the bylaw back to council for formal adoption, Brittany's going to have a conversation in terms of the legal perspective. Things like whether it's 2 hours, whether it's 3 hours, for example, that doesn't need to be decided as part of adopting the bylaw. The provisions are there. I think Councillor Campbell made the point in terms of bringing a 3rd recommendation that we get on with it. I think that's something we could take as a steer from council, or there could be a 3rd recommendation along the lines of intent to investigate the implementation of. But until we do understand the exact costings, it's hard to sort of say, right, start tomorrow. Things like the cost of enforcement, we don't have budget provision for that. So we'll need to understand what that looks like. Yes. Part of that too is if you're going to monitor a 2 or 3 hour parking window, what does that look like? Is it eyes on the parking? Is it frog parking? Is it something else? So there's a consideration of what that looks like and what the cost would be. And then whether it is enforcement officers from another council or a resource that we have in-house, we need to ensure we can do that as well. So I think probably a step ahead to sort of give a direction to get on with it. We just need to ascertain the cost of that. But in terms of the framework of the bylaw, I think with what's been put forward, subject to that legal input, a lot of what is covered can be adopted as is. And then, as I say, whether it's a steer from council or whether it's something that we bring back when in due course as soon as we can, because if there are budget implications, we'll need to factor that in. Probably the annual plan is the place to sneak that in if Amanda doesn't close the books too soon. Can't see you nodding ahead. So those are all the considerations we need to take into account. But I think the message has been heard loud and clear from the community, and I think the discussion around the table is very much to make it happen. I pick up the earlier points. I think Grant, the Councillor Hadfield, sorry, the rural community largely haven't been too concerned. I think that's a reflection of the work that Brittany and the team have done to really sit down with fed farmers, sit down with the rural community, and really understand their needs and incorporate a practical common sense approach into the bylaw. So the fact we're talking about time limits in the CBD, that for me is a really good win compared to our maybe previous attempts at this. I haven't heard a goat tether mentioned.
A couple of pages of that.
I know. So I'm taking that as a win regardless of what the decision is today. But yeah, I think in terms of time frame, whether it's the next council meeting or the one after, to adopt the bylaw, and that should give us time to work through the indicative costings and practicalities as well. But the bylaw is largely fit for purpose, I think, based on the conversation to date. I think the BERM discussion, that's probably one that we would need to change the document to allow for. So I guess if there's a general consensus from council, that's the direction that you'd like to travel, then we can make those changes, or we can make that following a further debate when we actually adopt the final bylaw.
Thank you. So what you're saying is that recommendation number 2 is suitable, given all the discussion we've had, that is still the correct wording for us to move forward. And then whether we want to add a third recommendation about to implement the parking discussion, subject to some of those investigations that we need.
That's correct. Yeah, I think recommendation 2 is fit for purpose.
I would perhaps recommend for recommendation 3 that we say something like, before adoption, we ensure the bylaw enables future decisions on time limited parking, enforcement officers, and the issuing of fines.
Okay, but what I'm hearing from the team is that recommendation 3 would be get on with it. Whereas, so we'd have to add something into that we want to proceed with that.
Okay.
Well, could we say can proceed?
Well, I guess can proceed is subject to how do we enforce it, the cost of it, all of those kind of things.
But in terms of the bylaw, if the bylaw enables us to do it, then we can proceed. Whether we choose to do it, that is a separate discussion.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Hamish. Just on the legal issues thing, I can't see any problem with that. Every other council in the country has parking restrictions, or just about everyone. So there's no problem with us putting parking restrictions in and enforcing it. I just can't see an issue at all with that one. I personally would like to add a third resolution today and keep it pretty simple. Because the bylaw does allow us to do this, but without further resolution, it means nothing will happen. We won't do anything. So I'd like to get that on the table, and I would keep it pretty simple, as I mentioned before, to say something like the council introduced time limit parking into the Fielding Town Centre, and that leaves council officers then up with the responsibility of working out how to do that, how and what to do. So I'm not directing, 2 or 3 hour limits or where the signs go or anything, but you start work on it. That's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. We'll get some advice on that.
Through you, Worship. Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as council directs officers to look at a proposal to implement that in a time frame or as soon as possible. And that gives us that sort of scope to look at those, bring it back, and then come back with a plan to implement that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McPadden.
Just briefly, this may be a revenue opportunity. Everyone says it's an expense, but there'll always be the offenders. And you may well find that it's rather flippant, but you may well find it's cost neutral.
Correct, and that's the work that we actually need to do. So to progress this, let's take recommendation number 2, and then we'll look at the whether, Steph, you're able to put up some appropriate wording for recommendation 3. But let's take them separately. Do I have a mover and a second for recommendation number 2? Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, just prior to that, Your Worship, I was of the understanding that we were going to deal with the topics as we went through, and I'm not quite sure that we've actually got off parking. And if we're wanting to parking, I think there's other issues for Brittany to actually take us through, or have I nodded off somewhere, colleagues?
I'm happy to do that if councillors would like to continue, or if you feel like you've covered what you wanted to cover, we can
Thank you. We've
those.
had some comments from councillors on other topics in here from that, but is there anything specifically in this report that you wanted to speak to?
Well, yes, there was, the worship.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll walk through and I'll just touch on certain things, and perhaps we could do it all as one from now.
Can I just take councillor Short? Query?
I think we should finish the conversation on parking and then adjourn for morning tea. It's just about 11:15.
That our intention was to adjourn after this discussion, but we were unsure how long this was going to take. So councillor Ford.
Can I suggest that we put a third, that we at least try and agree on a third recommendation here, which relates to parking, and then have a break, and then come and not pass two, or not consider two, because there's still more to come. So something like that, council consider a proposal to introduce limited parking into the town centre as soon as possible. Mr. Ward is the
Looking at your wording.
you want to do some finessing to that? That's what I just.
So councillor Campbell was recommending that council introduce time limited parking into the town centre, but I'm wondering, taking
So I
councillor
had two
Ford's-
bits that
yeah,
were look at a proposal to introduce,
Yep.
which covers the costs and
Yep.
detail. And the second bit is at the end is as soon as possible, because that could be, let's do that in 2035.
So if we change the wording to that, council consider the introduction
Don't worry, we can get all the.
of time limited parking in the Fielding CBD. As soon as possible sounds quite open-ended.
Yeah.
Whether you want to look towards a time.
What do you recommend?
I'm comfortable with that. Well, you can either give us a direction that you want it done within 3 months or within 1 month. Or if council's comfortable with as soon as possible, it puts us back on us to make that and bring it back to you in a timely fashion.
Except the fact we've got consider means that if you are better then to put a time frame on it, because that consideration is bringing back the results of that consideration, isn't it, for us to introduce?
I just think we should be perhaps a bit more definite in that, because consider means council officers may decide not to do it. We need to decide yes or no. Do we want this or not? That's not very clear directive.
That council consider the introduction of time limited parking into the Fielding Town Centre, and a report is brought back to council.
Within a time frame.
Within 2 months.
We say supports. I mean, we would actually pretty much support this. We're not wanting to consider, we're only wanting to consider the costs and the implementation, not, I think we've already, and that says, consider that, says that we haven't really made a decision, picking up on your point. I think we really need to say that we've made a decision subject to the costs or, the other concerns that were raised.
So therefore, the wording there that council supports the introduction, subject to a report coming back to council within 2 months?
Your worship, if I may make a suggestion, is
Yes,
that
go
actually we take a slightly different tack, and is that council directs officers to report back to council within a given time frame on the not the feasibility, but the the costs and to outline the procedural whatever on the introduction, basically of time limited parking into the CBD. But I think if we don't want to confuse it, but I think if we instruct officers to bring back a report detailing any.
So if we take those words and just put and a feasibility report is brought back to council within 2 months.
And I think this recommendation covers your point, but what it also does is says that we support the introduction of time limited parking. So that is the fact that we've sends the message to the community that we support it and we're asking for a report to come back within 2 months. So covered both
I
bases.
understand that, Your Worship, and that would be quite fine. Council supports the introduction of time limited parking and requests officers to report back with costs and everything else. And I think that
Which
pretty
is what
much
that
covers it.
says. So councillor Campbell, you moved that originally. Are you happy with the amended wording?
I think we're overthinking it a bit, but yes.
Councillor Shaw.
All I'm sort of concerned with, and I think it looks all right to me, is that we're, if we were legally challenged over our introduction of these things, that it's legally tight.
So sorry, through Your Worship, the bylaw would need to be adopted first.
Yep.
And then the second stage would be this feasibility report would come back following that adoption in terms of the introduction, which picks up the costs, the technicalities of it. And how we get on with it.
Thank you. So I guess the point is that we're bringing this in now, but then we were planning to go back to discuss some more details for recommendation 2, which would then, if that's passed, would cover your point. Councillor Ford.
Well, I'm happy to second that third.
Thank you.
Recommendation, but are we best to not vote on it until after we've done 2? There's a lot to leave it on the table.
Okay,
but at
thank
least
you.
we've kind of tidied up parking.
We've tidied up our discussion, so we don't need to come back into that one. So that one can sit there. Let's take a break, please, and be back ready to start at 11 o'clock.
You can never tell how long things are going to be. No. And for your family that have endured.
Got to think like a
some
woman.
of the time
sometimes,
frames
yeah.
are wrong.
No, you don't. It's the last thing you want to do. You're changing the other side, mate. You're not batting for that side.
Sorry, yeah, so I picked up that that's what 1 or 2, so I already did that resolution. That one's still on the table. So do I need to make these?
Thank you. Right, let's go back to our item on the deliberations for traffic safety and road use bylaw. We're looking at considering recommendation number 2, but I wanted to give the opportunity on any other topics other than CBD parking. Is there anything in that area you want to highlight on some of the recommended responses to submitters? Brittany, is there anything there or
you'll note that in the attachment 1, we have broken up all of the submissions into separate submission points and organised them by topics. And we also have suggested responses to each submitter on each of those points. However, in regards to parking, some of them will differ from what has been decided today. So what we will do as officers is go back and ensure that responses are cohesive with what you have discussed today. So I'd be happy to move on to roading and traffic control provisions within the bylaw if you are happy to do so. So largely feedback provided on these provisions related to matters outside of the bylaw, things like speed limit reductions, installation of roundabouts, provision of speed bumps. These have all been passed on to the roading team for consideration. And you may have read throughout the attachment 1 responses to submitters, just kind of explaining the process that the roading team generally undertake when they receive requests for things like roundabouts or speed limit reductions. Some feedback focused on the provisions within the bylaw related to council's ability to temporarily or permanently prohibit the use of vehicles on beaches. These submitters did not want to see council permanently removing vehicle accesses to beaches. So within responses to these submitters, we have said that council do not intend to restrict vehicle access to beaches unless access would pose a health and safety risk. So an example of this was when vehicle access to Himatangi Beach was restricted in 2022 because the stream had cut into the beach accessway, making it unsafe for vehicles. And some of you may remember a vehicle actually did end up into the stream. So it was a good decision at that time. Any questions or comments about the roading and traffic control provisions within the bylaw?
Thank you, Councillor Underwood.
Just suspicious of that wording, council do not intend, or it's not council's intention to close the road. Would it be able to be stronger than that, saying council would not close the access to the beach unless there was a danger present?
Yes, if council wanted us to reword it to that, that would be possible.
Yeah, I've just seen quite a bit of stuff on social media about beach access, not just in this area, but right throughout the country. Whether this is coming from central government, I'm not too sure, but there are quite a few comments going around about beach access being denied.
Thank you. I think, and while I support what you're suggesting, we also need to be careful of the implications of saying we will not be, because then somebody has to make sure that the resourcing is available for like the beach patrol to do their job, and that policing are able to do their part, given that it's a legal road on the beach. So by saying will not, we would have to meet the requirements to make it safe.
The other thing is that there's other legislation that allows council to do that under the definition of beaches as a road. So this provision is kind of highlighting that we are able to do so, but there's also supporting legislation that allows for that.
Okay, so you're saying that is already in there?
Yeah, but I understand that the council does not intend to, but yeah, it's something that we should probably retain the power to be able to do if required, but just expressing that it's not something council intends to do in terms of permanent restriction would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor McFadden.
Just we also, just to be clear, can I talk about the rubber mats for stock control?
Absolutely.
We'll get to that. No, yep, you're perfectly fine.
I'll back.
If we want to proceed to vehicle crossings,
Sorry, I didn't want to speak for me.
no worries. We'll proceed to vehicle crossings. So We had some social media posts highlighting that they are the responsibility of the owner occupier of the present premises to maintain, and we received a number of submissions after that post objecting to that need. The recommendation from officers is that we do not recommend that council takes over responsibility for maintenance costs of vehicle crossings. This maintenance is not currently rated for, would not be eligible for Waka Kotahi funding. And in addition, it's standard practice across neighbouring councils to require this, including Whanganui, Horowhenua, Tararua, and the Rangitikei districts. There was some feedback about approved contractors for installation of vehicle crossings. One submitter was concerned that it was prohibiting qualified people from undertaking this work. You would have seen in attachment 1, we've responded to the submitter that there's no reason he could not apply to become an approved contractor. So that process is enabling of that. And as officers, we do not recommend that council remove the process of approval for contractors completing work on vehicle crossings due to the risk this work provides for council assets. However, we have recommended as officers that we undertake a review of pricing of these contractors to ensure it remains fair. However, I've just noted there are currently 14 of these contractors, so we expect a good level of competition amongst that many contractors.
Thank you. Before I take questions, I just, Ben reminded me at the break and I've then forgotten to pass it on. You'll see that we've got a team here doing some filming. This is just generic filming of council in operation to do with a new comms initiative that we'll talk about later. They're not recording words, it's more visuals, so put a happy face on.
Sit up straight.
Councillor Hadfield.
Thank you, Worship. Look, in essence, I don't have too much of a problem with the intent of what's being said here about the vehicle crossings. However, and I may have missed it, I know for a fact under our vehicle crossing, which is a shared one, there is quite a bit of infrastructure under the actual vehicle crossing itself. Now, is the bylaw clear on who's responsible for anything that arises out of an infrastructure issue? And I'm talking about pipes, gas, power, sewer, stormwater, etc.
Refer to Hamish.
Yeah, so the bylaw does specifically refer to the vehicle crossing in terms of our infrastructure or connecting to our infrastructure. There's a range of different legislation that talks about utility service corridors and non-council infrastructure as well. So I'm not sure how clearly it's spelled out, but I don't think there's enough legislation in place to be quite clear where service utility owners' responsibilities fall and private properties do not.
The other thing that accommodates your question is that except with the written consent of the council, someone must not do work on a vehicle crossing. So that brings that connection about services, what's there, what could be risks. So that brings that connection about before the work's undertaken.
So our corridor access process includes engagement with not just our internal infrastructure, but also those external providers and the legislation that they work within. So the provisions for it, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McFadden.
I had the pleasure of getting a few generous words from one of the submitters. Michael will know who it is. And one of their concerns around the crossing was the fact that whilst they're happy to become qualified, they were concerned that the council would limit their ability to contract in the road management health and safety factor. In other words, they didn't want the approved contractor actually have to be qualified to do the traffic management and do the crossing as one entity, that they needed to, happy to comply, but they wanted to be able to contract somebody and to do that specifically because it was a specialised area.
Thank you.
Yeah, and through our corridor access request process, it's again, the provisions are there for that. We don't specify that it needs to be a one-stop shop. It's as long as the outcome is achieved, and if they can demonstrate that they've got an approved approved traffic management plan from an approved provider, and it's used as appropriate, then that meets their requirements in terms of doing work in that corridor of ours.
The other party was the fact that it was just a point that the developer could do the development and then it's handed to the council. But does the developer actually, under the rules, have to be compliant to do the road crossings within that development? Does that make sense?
Yep. So again, through your worship, there's two parts to that. One, sorry. Yeah, two parts to that. One is the corridor access process of linking into the existing infrastructure. You've also got the subdivision consenting process and adhering to MDC's engineering standards. So when that contractor has built the cul-de-sac or the development, there's two processes. One is adhering to our engineering standards to do it in the first place, and then that same corridor access component in terms of accessing into council's existing infrastructure. And if there is a need for an approved contractor or a council standover or whatever it may be, that's dealt with as part of that process.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Quarry.
Oh, you go.
Yeah, I was also concerned about the approved contractors. I know the pricing that is charged on some of those contracts is excessive. And the other comment I'd like to make, and it may be a little bit off topic, and that is that when a activity takes place on a title, the road crossing has to be upgraded. Now, what legal status does the council have in regard to being able to charge for that upgrade of the crossing, which can involve, $5,000 or more? So you can have, for example, a title being created, no change in use whatsoever, but there's a liability of $5,000 to put some tar seal from the road edge to either halfway to the gate or to the gate itself. Yeah.
So the trigger there, through your worship, the trigger there is again the subdivision requirements and the engineering standards. And so whether there's a intended change of use or not on behalf of the owner, the subdivision and engineering standards is what trigger that requirement for the vehicle entrance upgrade. It's the same as say building works on your house. You'll have a trigger in there in terms of the Building Act, and it's just part of upgrading things as they're done, as opposed to everyone's got to upgrade everything now. It's when there's a trigger, and in this case it would be that subdivision consent, and then the appropriate rules apply in terms of engineering requirements.
It can be quite expensive.
Yes, it can. Yep. I acknowledge that. Yeah.
Thank you, councillor Underwood.
I had two questions about the user of the road crossing being the person responsible for its upkeep because they're using it all the time. Is there a provision where the damage caused is from an outside truck or something that's come by and damaged the crossing and it's nothing to do with their normal use?
I guess through your worship, my take on that would be if a truck was passing by, it's unlikely it would damage the vehicle crossing because they'll be travelling in the legal road carriageway.
But if they went up on the footpath to park for some reason to get off the road and damaged it or something, or that's just an example, it may be damaged by stormwater or...
Yeah, I think that there's a practical case by case if there's clearly something that's happened as an event of all sorts. If a truck was coming into a private driveway, for example, and they damaged it on the way through, then that's a discussion between the property owner and the commercial user. But on those civil defence related matters or just acts of vandalism, deliberate or unintentional, they'll be dealt with case by case.
And the second one was the answer to the submission number 36 about vehicle crossings. It seemed to be the pat answer for everybody who was complaining about having to pay for their own upkeep. However, this person had made reference to the fact that there's flooding after rain, which affects the footpath and the driveways. With that being a stormwater issue, would that not be something that council would look to rectify?
Just to answer that one, we've logged that as a CCR request and that's been dealt by region team. So that's all in hand.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Thank you. Anything further on any of those recommended feedback to submitters? No.
So your worship, if you're happy to move forward to the stock on road related submissions. Oh, sorry, just to note, fire and emergency feedback on vehicle crossings, that will be considered as part of the review of our engineering standards, so not related to the bylaw. Stock on road provisions. The majority of submitters felt that these provisions were practical for stock owners and handlers, while still protecting the safety of road users and council assets. Some commended the removal of requirements that were previously proposed in 2020, like the permitting process. There was some disagreement amongst submitters about the practicality of requiring mats for stock crossings. As officers, we're not recommending that council remove this requirement, as it is reflective of the damage to the road that regular stock crossings can cause. I'll leave it there and hand it to council for any discussion.
Thank you for comment, councillor Hedfield.
Thank you, Worship. The mats was the one issue that I'd wondered about, because at the end of the day, again, it's you know, does it apply to cattle, dairy cattle, beef cattle? Does it apply to sheep? Sheep are, of course, much tidier animals and probably cause less damage. I think sheep are far more traffic aware. Just thought I'd throw that in. But you know, again, we're going to have a bylaw that potentially requires mats without actually not requiring mats. And I think there needs to be clarity around when a mat is required. Now, if you're regularly crossing dairy cattle, you know, once or twice a day across a road, well, perhaps that's a fair call. But if you're crossing sheep, you know, once a month or once a fortnight across the road, it would be over the top, in my view, to actually require a mat to be put down for a mob of sheep to cross the road once a fortnight or whenever.
So just to clarify,
we create obviously less damage. You know, there's they pee less, they poo less. You know, all of those things that are actually relevant. And I'd hate to see anything in a bylaw that actually, as I mentioned in the berm issue, it's pointless having a rule that actually is not going to be enforced to the letter of actually what's explicitly stated in the bylaw. So my view is, and you may have covered it, Brittany, but whatever it is around mats needs absolute clarity, in my humble opinion.
Thank you, Brittany.
so just to clarify, currently it relates to the definition of stock within the bylaw. So that means any farmed animal, including but not limited to cattle, horse, deer, sheep, goats, pigs, poultry. You know how it is with the chicken crossings. And so that is what it relates to in terms of the use of mats. So there is no kind of discretion based on what kind of animal. So just leaving council to comment further.
Just ask on that. So, Brent, is there an opportunity to put an explanatory note in the bylaw, which deals with Councillor Hedfield's issue around that regular dairy cow crossing?
How often?
Well, what you would have to do is say that stock mats are only required for a certain category of stock crossings, and you'd have to define what that category is. So you might, there's some issues with that because it's, you know, it becomes a long talking point on what is appropriate and what's not. But over to you.
Councillor McFadden.
I have an issue with the word regular, because that's subject to interpretation, and then we suddenly, if we end up in a fight, we end up in court and we're trying to define the word regular. So I think the word regular is actually dangerous, because, and then it also opens it up for someone to be potentially overzealous in terms of its enforcement. So I'll take Councillor Hatfield's point about the stock types, but I think we need to define the regular. If you're going to cross once a fortnight or once a week with 200 sheep, you're going to go and buy a rubber mat. Is that regular?
Can I just,
Hamish.
We've engaged with Federated Farmers on this point specifically.
Yes.
Can I give some feedback in terms of their commentary?
So the farmers that were present at the engagement before the bylaw were released, a lot of them actually already use stock mats. So that might be about like a little bit of a bias of these because they actually already use them. Just because I thought there may be some questions around this, I did look up the price of a stock crossing mat. So I found a new mat agri with 5.2 meters length, 8 meters for $1,782. So that gives you an indication of the costs of something that can be used multiple times. But yeah, so there's probably a mix between farmers that currently use them, currently not, but definitely from the roading team's perspective, they're best practice across New Zealand.
Councillor Blackmore.
Oh, no, Hamish asked my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Belsky, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, obviously I spoke too early on the subject, but definitely dairy cows crossing the road is a must. Sheep is certainly not in the question. And myself, we've got a farmer up our way that uses the roadway quite a lot for sheep, and it hasn't even touched the seal or damaged anything. But I have seen the seal completely damaged by dairy crossing, and when council renewed it, it was never the same nice flat crossing. It was always a dip there. So I really believe that it's essential that dairy farmers crossing the road on a regular basis, twice a day, or need to have definitely a mat, without a shadow of a doubt. The mats need to be upgraded. The ones at home are very ragged and leave a mess on the road still. So there needs to be some, perhaps look at the mat every now and again, just to make sure it's up to scratch. But no, sheep, horses, anything like that, it's just impractical completely and utterly. So I think it needs to be myself worded as a dairy requirement.
Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. Yeah, my understanding is that dairy cows go across from point to point. Any other animals, sheep, beef cattle, they will spread out once they hit the crossing, and they will move up and down the road before they cross over to the other side. And it would be totally unpractical to try and constrict them to within a passing that dairy cows are currently with. So yeah, to make a long story short, I'd move stock and replace it with dairy cows.
Thank you, Councillor Headfield.
Yeah, thanks. Your worship. Look, I think this is the issue because it is, as Councillor Quarry says, point to point for dairy, and perhaps some guidance could actually be sought from feds on this again. But the other thing is that if we impose some sort of restriction on dairy cows that are actually doing crossing twice a day, point to point, it may, and there are a lot of underpasses, but it may also encourage people from a long-term perspective to actually look at an underpass rather than consistently worrying about damage to the road on a daily basis and mats on, off. So I do support Councillor Quarry's comments.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Councillors, I think the wording in the bylaw is absolutely fine as it is. It's very clear that under 29.2I, it says mats must be used to protect the road verge and the carriageway from any damage. Now, if you're taking either beef cattle or sheep up the road, they're not going to cause any damage. Dairy cattle going across the road at the same point every day, day after day do. So that's when mats are required. They're not required under the bylaw for those other sundry activities. So look, the wording in the bylaw is fine. We don't need to, I think we're overthinking it.
Councillor Short.
Thank you. I've not actually seen the use of dairy mats, so they get put down per crossing, they're not left there permanently.
But vehicles are able to drive over them as required.
Yeah. $1,000 for a rubber mat across the road is about $100,000 at least cheaper than an underpass. So I actually would be surprised if any farmers objected to the cost of doing that.
Hamish.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Councillor Belsky, I think the key thing is that we're trying to protect the roading asset, right? So putting in place a requirement to have the mats where there is a genuine risk to that pavement being damaged, as Councillor Campbell's outlined, that's the intent behind the bylaw. It's not to create a whole bunch of rules and complications for people to move sheep, goats and chickens around the district. So the wording is there. It's our application of it. I don't see us having an army of enforcement people out chasing up the other farming types. It is really to get to the dairy farmers who are not putting mats down and running stock across the road. And there are examples of that around the district, and it does have a genuine impact on the road, which at the moment is a direct cost to us as a council and on behalf of our community. So this is a way of addressing the problem at source for the dairy farmers.
Thank you, councillor Belsky.
I forgot to add that basically the dairy cows, the big issue with dairy cows compared with other cattle and sheep is that they are dripping milk when they go across. And that's a fact. They're full of, the udders are really full coming across from the grass and it's dripping milk onto the road and the milk is very acidic. So you've only got to see that on your gumboots after a while. So that's one of the issues with dairy farms, dairy cows.
I guess a comment I'd say based on what Hamish just said is if the intention is to target dairy cows and not the others, why wouldn't you say dairy cows?
Yeah.
Yeah, so council could recommend to us as officers that we restrict that requirement just to that type of stock, which is actually referred to as cattle in the bylaw. But if you wanted to define that further to dairy cows, we could do that as well. So is that something council wants us to do?
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
Like we need to be very clear to our community about what does this mean? And we've already talked around the table, we're confused. Is it chickens? Is it, so do we need to be specific? If that's what if that's the stock that we're targeting, why aren't we saying that?
Exactly.
Yes, so we'd be happy to make that change.
Hamish.
Yeah, so Brittany, we're saying that we can amend the definition of stock to include cattle and dairy cattle specifically.
No, so what we're saying is for that specific provision around mats, we would specify that that only applies if the animal being crossed is a dairy cow.
Yeah. That should address the concerns without overcomplicating it, hopefully.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Look, I just wonder if actually referring to a point-to-point crossing actually might be the best method, because actually that's what we're talking about, rather than specifying whether it's a dairy cattle or a beef cattle, that we actually refer to point-to-point crossing on a regular, well, Councillor McFadden doesn't like the word regular, but daily actually, referring to point-to-point crossing on a daily basis, to me would actually encapsulate what it is that we're talking about.
Sure, your worship. I'll carry on.
Well, to be honest, I'm a little bit reluctant to actually to single out dairy in a bylaw. I just don't think that's useful.
That's what it is.
It is what it is, but I think we can cover that by saying point to point.
Councillor McFadden.
I'm happy to sacrifice, go to frequently. Regular. Well, frequently is different to regularly.
Is it?
So just to clarify what you're saying, that is that you'd be saying it's only for, so there's two options here from what you're saying, is only for frequent stock crossing activities, for example, point to point. So just on that note, the definition of stock crossing means the movement of stock from one side of a road to the other at a fixed point or location. Oh, okay. Where it moves down the road, it's referred to as stock droving. So just going back to the two decisions that you have to make is, one, do we define it as the frequency of stock crossing and define it to all animals, or do you decide that it's only applicable to one type of animal and it's for any crossing of those animals? So my recommendation, if that helps, would be to specify the type of animal, just because when you specify the frequency, there's a lot of different understandings of what that frequency actually is, and the enforcement becomes difficult.
Councillor Short.
When you looked at the bylaws of those other councils, did anything stick out there in how they defined it?
There is a mix of how they defined use of stock mats.
Yes.
So there was a real mix about those who required stock mats and those that didn't. What we do know is obviously NZTA guidance recommends the use. Some councils do it, some don't. So there is a real mix.
I just wondered for those that did use it, how they worded it in their bylaw.
Yeah, I suppose there's a mix between those that recommended it as a guidance note and others that required it. Yeah.
Personally, I'm happy with dairy cows. I can think of someone not too far away who takes sheep across the road to his wool shed all the time and does absolutely, all the time, not daily, but a couple of times a week. Absolutely no damage.
Thank you. So, Councillor Ford.
Your worship, I hadn't realised that this was so technical for a mere urban based person. But my only serious comment is to congratulate you on the glowing comments from Federated Farmers.
Yes.
I think, given where we've been,
yes,
that is huge.
Big improvements. Yep. Excellent. So what I'm hearing around the table is that we define that it refers to dairy cows.
Yes, happy to do that.
Okay.
Great. So let's move forward, Your Worship, onto the stock underpass. So only one point of feedback was received from Federated Farmers, and they felt it will assist council in improving liability for non-compliance. So we're happy with those provisions to remain as is. Moving on to roadside grazing and tethering. This feedback spanned from agreement with the license to occupy for permanent roadside grazing to disagreement with the need for any regulations on roadside grazing at all. Two submitters commented on the definition of hours of daylight. However, we made that definition in partnership with Federated Farmers to ensure it reflected the flexibility and dynamic nature of farming within our district. So if councillors have any comments on roadside grazing and tethering, otherwise happy to move forward.
Right, thank you.
No. Okay, so one last one is the exception section of the bylaw. So to accommodate some feedback from Fire Emergency in New Zealand, you will see in Appendix 2 to this report some track changes to the bylaw that we're recommending, just to be sure that the provisions don't stop an emergency vehicle from doing certain things. So section 42 of the bylaw exceptions would add a point that a person is not in breach of the bylaw if that person proves their act or omission was taken to attend an emergency situation using an emergency vehicle. And we've defined emergency vehicle as is defined in the road user rule. So there's cohesion in the definition. So over to council to move the recommendations from today.
Thank you. Any further questions in relation to this? Councillor McPherson.
Just the emergency vehicle, hypothetically, just please, Hamish, is we contract somebody in who needs to actually, let's say, emergency, deal with emergency that's not a council member and not a recognised emergency vehicle, could be a contractor. Does that exclusion cover them?
So the exception already in 42.1a. So a person is not in breach if their action is to avoid the death or injury of a person.
And also in that scenario, they'd be acting under direct instruction from council.
From council.
So that's fine.
Yep. Thank you. Any final? No. So on that basis, we can go to recommendation 2 as set out on page 53. If I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Ford.
That the proposed post-consultation amendments to the proposed traffic safety and road use bylaw 2023, shown with attachment 2 to this report, be included in the final bylaw for adoption by council.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor Helen, do we want to include the changes that have been requested throughout this process as kind of a little aside to that? So
yes, we need
including, maybe comment including any changes requested by council at deliberation?
I think that's, yes, and that if we can put that all into the same motion, that tidies it up and gives direction as to where to next. We've got that, Steph? Yep. Thank you. Mover, are you happy with that? Thank you. I had a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McFadden. Any further discussion? Put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. So now we go to the recommendation 3. If we could just have that wording up. We've discussed it. We've put some wording up. We just need to move and second and see where this one goes. That number 3, that the council supports the introduction of time limited parking into the Fielding Town Centre with a feasibility report back to council within 2 months. It has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. So thank you. And I want to echo the comments I'm hearing up here. We have come a long way in this whole topic when you consider what happened last time when previous council tried to discuss this whole thing. What it clearly shows is that council this time has engaged with our community. And I think the relationships that we've been building up, we have quarterly meetings now with fed farmers, that regular dialogue and the work that you and your team has done is clearly reflected in the response we've had. So well done.
Thank you.
Go back tomorrow, Brittany. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to item 11.4. This is the temporary closure of a road for the purpose of the car club to conduct the rally sprint. And
We're welcoming Georgia.
Georgia, welcome to the table. We've got your report. We'll take it as read and you're welcome to comment on it.
Sorry, Georgia, your microphone. Stick it on.
Just pop it on. Yep.
Cool.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm at council today to present the key points for the road closure, as council must approve road closure applications under section 342B in the 10th schedule of the Local Government Act. So the Pararorangi proposed temporary road closure was advertised on the 26th of January. We called for objections and no objections were received. The road will be closed from the intersection at Arapata Road, and this is a no exit road. Only 3 groups of landowners will be affected, and they have been contacted directly by the Manawatu Car Club and given a letter stating the information of the closure. Their only concern was the current condition of the road. So our roading maintenance manager has liaised with the landowners and the Manawatu Car Club, and our roading contract maintenance contractor will be doing scheduled maintenance, and that has been brought forward to the week following the event. And the landowners have been notified of this. And the Manawatu Car Club have public liability insurance cover of $10 million.
Excellent, thank you. Open that up for questions, comments. It's reasonably straightforward. It's an activity they do on an annual basis. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you. So the upgrade of the road, I take it, it'll be bordering on a capital upgrade, the water tables and so forth. That'd be
the specified maintenance that's in the current schedule of work. So it won't be a capital upgrade as such, but we'll certainly make sure that the road is in the current level of service.
Better condition than currently.
Taking on board the current road classification for the dead end road with 3 households on it.
Yeah.
So what does that include? Additional metal put on or just being graded?
Metal and a grade, yeah.
Thank you. If there's nothing further, do I have a mover and a seconder, please, for the recommendation on page 109? Councillor Ford.
So just firstly, thanks very much, Georgia, for making it so clear to follow. Really appreciate that. I move that pursuant to section 342B and the 10th schedule of the Local Government Act 1974, for the purpose of allowing Manawatu Car Club to conduct the Pararorangi Road Rally Sprint event, Pararorangi Road be closed to ordinary vehicular traffic between 8 AM and 5 PM on Saturday, 4th of March 2023, subject to the receipt of the public liability and insurance policy, which will be current at the time of the event, and a traffic management plan prepared by an authorised site traffic management supervisor and in accordance with the New Zealand Transport Agency Code of Practice of Temporary Traffic Management.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Belsky. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. You can go back tomorrow too.
Thank you. Okay, right, we're moving on to item 11.5. This is our submission for the Future of Local Government review, and welcome our team online with that. I just want to point out with this one is that we've had some discussion around this in workshop. The submissions focus group have done some work on it. So the team are bringing this back today to ensure that council support the wording that we're putting into the various points that are raised in here. I guess the other point is it is not seeking necessarily to get to a consensus point, but it is to ensure that we are comfortable that the views around the table, albeit they may be mixed, are reflected into this document that goes back as part of our submission. So Lisa, I hand it over to you. Do you want to, and how you go through this, and welcome Kathy as well.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Morena, good morning, everyone. So the purpose of presenting this, as Mayor Helen has indicated, is to finalise the submission. We agreed at the last submissions assessment panel that everyone was invited to, that we would bring this back to council to approve the final version. So that is the reason that it's here. And yeah, given the diverse views on various topics, we want to ensure that elected members are all comfortable with the submission in its final form. The intention today is not to relitigate all of the matters that are in the draft submission. It's just to finalise those little changes that are included in the report. So the closing date for submissions is the 28th of February. So after today, I will finalise the submission and then send it back to the submissions assessment panel, just to say, yep, all these changes are done, and then get it signed and lodged. So recommendation 1 outlines my proposed changes to the cover letter, and those are in response to feedback received from councillors. Recommendation 2 outlines proposed changes to the submission responses themselves, and those are all incorporated into the draft versions that are included in the annexes A and B to the report. So what I'm sort of suggesting today is to work through each of those changes and just confirm that everyone is comfortable with those. And then recommendation 3 is sort of an open-ended one, just to discuss some matters raised in feedback from Councillor Hadfield, just because I didn't feel comfortable making those decisions without discussing them with everyone present. So yeah, just keen for feedback on those and to sort of work through some final wording there, and then those will become resolutions that we'll put up and pass as we go, if everyone's happy with that approach.
Thank you. So do you want to go through those recommendation by recommendation?
Yes, Your Worship, I can do that. So the first one, so recommendation 1A, that is essentially that additional sentence. So there are differing views on local government's role and responsibilities in relation to fertility. MDC requests further guidance from central government on this. So that was based on some feedback. So that fits in key point 3, which was in the cover letter. So if that's Annex A, I believe.
Thank you. So my view is that fairly reflects the different views around the table by adding that sentence into that. Is there any, Councillor Blackmore?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the addition is probably more relevant. My view is that the addition should be our statement. I don't believe that the principles should be enshrined in laws related to our first statement there. And for those of us who attended the Te Tiriti training, we heard from a legal expert as to why these principles are not enshrined in law and how they have evolved throughout the treaty process as that itself evolves and matures. So I believe on that one, we should be just sticking with the second sentence, which is the addition.
And removing the first sentence?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Councillor Bell, you had your hand?
Oh,
No,
it was
sorry.
me, but it was fairly similar to what.
Oh, sorry, it was Councillor
Blackmore-
Short.
Yeah, but I think Councillor Blackmore said similar.
So what Councillor Blackmore is suggesting is that we would take the first sentence out of number 3, the principles of, we would delete that and just keep the underlined sentence, there are differing views. Okay, so I'm not hearing anything opposed to that. Councillor Hadfield?
Yeah, clearly I've expressed my views on this.
Yes.
And I think as we know, there are no defined principles in law, and I've referred back to the 5 principles that were put forward by the Longi government in 1989 as the basis of a good discussion point. I guess I still believe that there's public discussion to be had on this, and so I still, think that I've raised a valid point, and it's entirely my right to express that view, which I'm doing.
Thank you.
And I do believe that for sake of clarity, public discussion is needed. And as I suggested, that document with those 5 principles from 1989 would be a good starting point for conversation. However, at the end of the day, it's democracy. My colleagues will, decide what they want to do.
Thank you. So what would, if we followed through with what you're saying, what would you be recommending we add or change to number 3?
Well, I think the point that I made around, and it's further in the document, Lisa, somewhere, around the comments I made around the 1989 agreement between the Longi government, the Waitangi Tribunal and the New Zealand Maori Council is a relevant comment to actually be made, that it's a good starting point for discussion.
Okay. So I guess what we're trying to ascertain is, we, as suggested, is that we would remove the first sentence and leave the underlying sentence as our response on number 3. Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. No, I support the 3 as it stands. I think it'll be important that any principles that are talked about in the future actually do have a base document to go back to. And that's part of the problems we're facing at the moment, is that there is no base meaning to the principles that as they move forward. And they become very flexible, they become adaptable to the times and the circumstances that present themselves. And yet there is no basis, no base document to refer to. And I'd refer to a recently published article by Kerry Burke, the ex-Speaker of the House, probably in the Clark government. And one of his comments that he made was that when you refer to history, you go back to your base document and you start building up from there. And if you don't have a base document, you've got nothing to build your foundation on. So I would support it as it is.
Thank you. Support it as it is, as it is put in our report, or support it with the first sentence removed?
Support it with the first sentence included.
Included.
Yeah.
Councillor Hadfield.
Also, if I may, Your Worship, I think when I look at the first sentence, it doesn't actually entirely articulate, I guess, where I'm coming from. And it would be my view that we'd be better off to say something like the principles, rather than just say the principles should be enshrined, they actually need to be defined and agreed to, and then promulgated into law. Is probably a better way of putting it from my perspective.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, so based on, so what I'm hearing is that maybe something needs to be added there. There are differing views on requests further guidance.
Well, Your Worship, I'm actually happy to move that recommendation 1, just to literally to get a vote on it, because at the end of the day, what people think is what they think. But I would like the wording changed to after should, to include should be defined and agreed before being enshrined or promulgated. Actually, promulgated is a better word, I think, before being promulgated into law, and that leaves the debate about which area of law perhaps should be promulgated on is a job for politicians, not for us.
Councillor Bell.
Your Worship, I wonder if, just to add to Councillor Hadfield's suggestions on, first we need to identify what the principles are. Perhaps we could add MDC request further guidance on defining the principles from central government. So rather than us debating across the table what we believe the principles are, we take that responsibility and guidance from the central government. Because one of the things that's just been on my mind when I've been looking at this particular recommendation is we are all confused here and we all have different pockets of academic capital in this space and cultural capital. And we're not going to get into, I guess, a cohesive front on this, but we can also make sure that the central government take full responsibility. So we're not always at the table arguing or debating this kaupapa. Yeah.
And
yeah, that's a good point.
And Your Worship, I'd certainly support Councillor Bell in that regard. And I think from my perspective, having a definition so that we actually know what we're discussing then actually makes total sense.
Councillor Bell.
I think one of the things that that is really pertinent as well is before we open up for public discussion, and I know Councillor Hadfield, you're pushing for community involvement into this kaupapa in particular. I think that's why it's really important that we get firm guidance from central government first, because otherwise then we're allowing the community to define it for us, and that's where we have a risk of it getting to a point where it's unhealthy and we're still back at square one, confused.
Thank you. So can you just go back to what you were suggesting the wording might be on there so that Steph can capture it?
So MDC requests further guidance on defining the principles from central government on this, identifying the principles. Where am I looking? Sorry, Steph. Are we looking at the right one? Yep. Underneath the principles to should be enshrined. Am I looking at the right one?
For 4
principles.
This is recommendation 1 of the report, Councillor Bell.
Yes, so is it to go in that bottom sentence where it says MDC request further guidance from central government on this? You could add it into that last sentence there to say.
So identifying the principles, rather than adding another sentence, you can just add
just
the
add
2
it within
words.
the
It's
body.
just easier to add the 2 words at the end and then it's not repetitive.
Yep.
But that's just nitpicking. So no, you go ahead, Steph. Whatever's easier, sorry.
If we can get it into one sentence, that's going to capture it.
So if we can if we can remove the Local Government Act or similar legislation and just before being promulgated into law, I think that's the right terminology. I think it's not.
I think that sentence should read MDC requests further guidance on defining the principles from central government.
Perfect. It was just those, just the addition of those 2 words. 3 words.
The principles, from central government and take the rest out,
Yes, please.
Although we have to agree on wording on this, though, don't we?
I think you had it better before, to be honest.
Yes, Steph, just slow down, Steph.
What we're saying is that I understand. I think saying that the Manawatu District Council requests in that first statement, and then there are different views on the local government's role and responsibilities.
So you're saying we'd take the underlined
Further
sentence
guidance
out.
on the principles is actually what we're saying, and the further guidance should be at the beginning, which I thought was what Councillor Bell was suggesting.
Yep.
Well,
we just want them to define the principles. We just want them to define the principles.
We want,
So the last
overcomplicating
underlying
it.
sentence would come first.
And rather than referring to guidance, just say MDC requests that central government define the principles. Or something like that.
So there are different.
What you said first, that's good.
Yes. It's recorded, isn't it? Can we go back?
No, the second
and amongst all this,
come
Lisa,
first.
I'd just like to acknowledge the immense amount of work that you've done on all of this. So well done.
Thank you. It's not been my favourite.
And do we need the last sentence?
NDC request guidance on defining principles.
Well, it'd be interesting because this document.
I think we need to start
By
with
central government.
regarding defining the
And the
principles of TTDT.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it will depend on who the government is.
Is that-
Yes. What principles are we talking about? Yep.
From central government. There are differing views on local government and its role and responsibilities in relation to TTDT.
Yes.
The principles of TTDT should be defined and agreed on before being incorporated into the Local Government Act or similar legislation. So change-
Incorporated, yeah. Okay.
It does into legislation.
Into legislation.
Forget about which act.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Into legislation.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
does that reflect the conversation we've had?
So we're asking for guidance from central government to define the principles and acknowledging that we have differing views and that the principles should therefore then be defined and incorporated into legislation. Okay,
So
thank you.
So we take out the underlying components.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lisa, so the next point.
So the next one is just the addition of MDC is generally opposed to lowering the voting age to 16. That was based on Councillor Hadfield's email saying that some opposed the lowering of the voting age regardless and felt that wasn't adequately reflected in that summary as it stood. So I've just added in that. I know there were some differing views, which is why I've used the word generally.
Councillor Short.
I don't oppose the voting age coming down to 16, and I actually looked up a few countries that do allow 16-year-olds to vote, and it was quite interesting. It's the countries that we aspire to with our localism, like Austria and Germany. Scotland have done it recently, but it was all based around that civic education first. And I think when you look at the ageing population that we've got in New Zealand at the moment, which is only going to increase, we're going to get a democratic imbalance, and the older people are going to get more say due to the numbers of people in that age group. 16-year-olds can earn money and pay tax. I'm not saying they pay rates, but if they do, they don't have the option to choose to vote on how that money might be spent.
Thank you. So what we're asking is...
So I actually myself would take out the underline bit altogether and just start with the voting, if the voting age in New Zealand be lowered to 16, this needs to be preceded by civic education, etc.
Which is fine. However, if there are a number of around the table who still don't support lowering the voting age, then we should reflect that there are differing views. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And look, I acknowledge in the comments I made to Lisa that I believe in feedback I've had from members of the community, which I'm reflecting.
16-year-olds? Did you ask 16-year-olds?
You'd be interested to what I ask my grandchildren, Alison. But anyhow, it's actually the community is made up of a significant group of people that actually have an age variance, and in a Westminster democracy, actually, whether you're 16 or whether you're 20 or whether you're 40, 50, 60, 70 or 80, we all have equal rights of expression of views and free speech. And so given that the feedback I've had, as I say again, from members of the community, they are opposed to the lowering of the voting age to 16, sorry. So as I originally said, Your Worship, and I actually believe that that's probably the view of the majority of my colleagues, and I could be wrong, but given that I presume we're going to take the recommendations one by one, I was happy to actually move recommendation 1 with the alterations that are up there to actually enable us to move on.
Thank you. What I am interested in is the sentence that's been suggested to be added. Is there, what other level of support is there around the table for that one to be included? So there is some. So that.
Sorry, what was the question? I didn't understand.
Of support. We've heard from Councillor Hadfield wanting just to say that we are generally opposed, but I'm wondering if the word should be there is differing views, which is, it's differing views. It's not generally opposed. It's differing views. Councillor McFadden.
I think the differing views is not just the age, but about how you can ensure that you get the outcome that we were wanting to aspire to. So I think the differing views is a better phrase, because some are looking, you're saying about education and a whole lot of, everyone will have a differing view as to actually how to get them there. So that's just what you wish it.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
I think we need to take a vote on 18 or 16 and the wording reflects the outcome of that vote. Is there a majority that support 18? Is there a majority that supports 16? And if there is, then so be it. That's democracy.
Well, we're not talking about whether it's 18 or not. I just asked who else supported opposing the voting age to 16, and there was 3.
Well, that then should reflect in the comments.
Which is what we're suggesting. We have differing views.
Which is the original comments that were up there.
No, it said generally opposed, which is a little bit different.
That was the previous one.
That was what it came to us in this report as generally opposed. What we're suggesting is that we change it to has differing views, which clearly reflects.
Well, I'd have a majority would vote against it, lowering the age, because it would be a majority.
Councillor Belsky.
I actually agree with Councillor Hadfield. My feedback that I've had is a flat no for 16-year-olds. I just have not got that experience and maturity to make these decisions. So that's what's been fed back to me. And so I just pass that on for me.
Thank you, Councillor Ford.
This is a submission basically to provide feedback. It's not for us to make the decision on whether the voting age lowers to 16 or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact of the matter is that there is a range of views. There might be a majority, but differing views is, I think, more reflective of the actual situation than what was there previously.
Yep.
So I'm happy to support what's there.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Hadfield, you were to get progress. We're happy to move recommendation 1.
Yes, Your Worship. And I'm just hoping like Ellie, you don't want me to read it all out, but I can if you so desire.
Well, as written on the screen with those changes that we've discussed.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to move that as it's currently displayed on the screen.
Thank you. Have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McFadden. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Let's move on. Number 2. Could be here a while.
Okay, I'll keep it moving. So the next changes are to the templated responses. So that's Appendix B. So our responses that will be cut and pasted into the submission form. The first is around recommendation 9, which is that central government explores a stronger statutory requirement on councils to foster Māori capacity to participate in local government. And this addition has come through from our Principal Advisor Māori, and it says iwi Māori must be formally supported and enabled to participate through the availability of financial resources rather than being expected to expend volunteer energy. Central funding of this participation will ensure that it's not subject to local political financial priorities and will offer some consistency across the country.
Okay, so that's been recommended to us to include in our response. Feedback. I guess, put it this way, if this has been recommended, it goes forward, is there any that would not support that, that want to speak to it? Councillor Quarry.
Thank you. I believe we will be opening ourselves up to government saying, okay, you want that to take place, you will fund it. And I believe that's the danger of this motion that's been put forward.
Councillor Campbell.
I think the gist of this motion is that it's exactly the same as government, central government forcing change in regulation and stuff onto our council where we're expected to do things without being funded. It's exactly the same for iwi Māori. At the moment, we're required to go to them to consult. They don't have any resources to fund that. They're not funded at all for it. They have to, you know, it's all volunteer time. That's what that's about. So it's exactly the same. I see it in terms of you know, that funding structure.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Just to follow on from Councillor Quarry's comments, I think it's very clear in the recommendation that we're asking for central government to be the ones that resource and fund iwi capability. I don't think there's any risk of in this particular writing that we are acknowledging that it's our sole responsibility. I just want to support Councillor Campbell's comments about the volunteer time spent that enables us to sit at the table and be the best partners we can be. I think there is an expectation for us as iwi to be in mana whenua to be recognised as partners, and for us to do that we have to have equal resources. It's particularly just kind of like a marriage, you share your resources, and that's how we see this. Well, that's a healthy marriage, and so we want to have a healthy marriage. We want to like our partners, so it's really important that we acknowledge that there is a lot of time that's spent on a local level from iwi to ensure that we honour our side of our partnership.
Thank you. Councillor Hadfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Look, Councillor Campbell's given us a pretty erudite description of actually what the guts of this is. But whilst we agree with that, I wonder if there's not other members or groups in our community actually that would also benefit from being included in this, because actually it's an issue that, you know, central government doesn't fund across the board, not just iwi, but, you know, other groups as well. And what we're saying is here is actually don't keep pushing stuff onto us. It's actually, it affects actually, with respect, just more than iwi. There's other groups in the community that, you know, can be similarly affected. And I wonder if we shouldn't be a little bit more inclusive. Just a question.
I think going back to Councillor Campbell's point, the government is requiring us to engage with iwi on a range of topics. So they're requiring us to do it. And we're saying to them, you require us, so give iwi the resources for them to be able to do what you want them to do.
With respect, Your Worship, the government also require us to consult with others as well. And the point I'm making is that I think that could be a little bit more universal.
Councillor Campbell.
No, it's a bit bigger than that, because I'll give you an example of resource consenting. All right. So somebody does a subdivision, they need to consult with the iwi, you know, to see if it's all right. They don't employ any resource planners, but they need to because they're getting so much work pushed their way. Every resource consent, just about every building consent has to go to the iwi for consent, and they're not employing any planners because they haven't got any money to employ them. That's the problem. And so they're doing it all on volunteer time.
Yeah.
You know, that's the gist of this one. I think this one is specifically a lot bigger than those other ones you're referring to. Councillor Hadfield. Yeah.
Thank you,
know,
Councillor.
acknowledge your point, but this is a big funding question.
Councillor Short.
Central government is requiring us to do this legislatively and through the RMA processes and consent applications, etc. If you're required to get other technical reports, engineers' reports, you know, landscape architects' reports, you would expect those to be funded. It's no difference in getting cultural expertise from mana whenua.
Thank you. So are we generally in support of accepting the recommendation of including that statement in there? That's what I'm hearing around the table. Thank you. Right. Thank you. Move on. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
See if we can capture all of these in the one recommendation?
So the next one is related to recommendation 13. It's just to correct a typo. I just took out the word means. So I think that should be pretty straightforward to accept.
Thank you.
And similarly, the second one on recommendation 14. So I just added the words is limited, and that was just to make that sentence make sense.
Thank you.
The next one is the deletion of a sentence, and that was requested by Council's Principal Advisor Māori, and the reason is that it implies council involvement in relation to that, and it was an iwi-led initiative, so that's why I've taken that out.
Thank you.
And then the next one is the addition of the words between the CE and elected members, and the replacement of the word employees with employees. Those changes are to fix errors and to more clearly communicate council's viewpoint on those matters.
Thank you.
And then the next one is the addition of the word generally, and that was in response to Councillor Hadfield's questioning of whether this recommendation received universal support. So just be worth checking on that one.
I guess to be consistent, are we saying generally supports or has differing views? Or does it not matter?
So the recommendation is that central government retain the Māori wards and constituencies mechanism subject to amendment in current policy processes, but consider additional options that provide for a tiriti-based partnership at the council table. And we've said MDC generally supports this recommendation and believes that this would assist MDC in growing such partnerships. So it previously just said MDC supports.
Councillor Hadfield.
I think to be consistent with everything else we've done is that generally support should be replaced by differing views.
Has differing views.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would that be supported around the table? Councillor, you're putting your hand up to support that. Thank you. So would you replace that? Differing views. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is the replacement of has not convinced to unconvinced. Again, it was just a correction, a drafting error.
Okay, thank you. So that's the end of recommendation 2. Can we have a mover and seconder for recommendation 2?
Sorry, Richard, just going back to recommendation here. Because you've changed it to different views, does that then make the end of that sentence not quite make as much sense?
Oh, true. Has differing views on this recommendation. Full stop. If we've got differing views, do we then delete the last part? It makes more sense. It's just making a statement. We have different views on this. So delete that. Thank you. Thanks for that, Ash. So given those that discussion and changes for recommendation 2, do I have a mover and seconder as shown? Thank you, Councillor Ford. The seconder, Councillor Short. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Number 3.
Okay, thank you, Worship. So the first requested change, so A, this is the word equal, and in the last sentence